Story 1. 400 feet down. The gas coming into my helmet smelled like a coin somebody had held in a sweaty hand all day, and I noticed it because that was new. 9 days in saturation, and the gas had never smelled like anything before. I stood on the bottom of the North Sea in a column of my own light, and I breathed in and thought, that is copper, that is the taste of a penny, and I did not say it over comms because a man does not report a smell. My name is Cole Merrick, and I have been a commercial saturation diver for 11 years. I want you to understand what that job actually is before I tell you what happened on the Vestland, because most people picture something from a movie, a man in a shiny suit walking on the seabed while fish drift by. And that is not it. That is not it at all. What it is this. You live inside a steel can for a month at a time. The can is called the chamber, or the pot, or sat, and it is bolted to the deck of a ship, and it is pressurized to the same pressure as the water 400 feet down or 500 feet down, or however deep the job is, so that your body is squeezed the same as the ocean would squeeze you. You breathe a mix of helium and oxygen because regular air would kill you at that pressure, would turn nitrogen into a poison in your blood. So instead, you breathe the helium, and it makes your voice go high and stupid like a cartoon, and after the first hour you stop hearing it. You live in there with 2 or 3 other men. You sleep in bunks the size of coffins. You eat food passed in through a lock, and it comes in warm, and by the time the pressure equalizes, it tastes like nothing. You do not shower right, you do not smell right, and when it is your turn to work, you climb into a bell. The bell is a smaller can. It drops off the side of the ship on a wire, down through the water, down and down, and when it reaches the bottom, the bellman opens a hatch in the floor, and you go out into the water and you work. Welding, cutting, torquing bolts on a wellhead, clearing debris off a pipeline, whatever they are paying for. You are connected to the bell by an umbilical, which is a bundle of hoses and wires as thick as my wrist. It carries your breathing gas. It carries hot water that pumps through your suit because the water down there is cold enough to stop your heart in about 4 minutes if the hot water quits. It carries your communications and your depth reading and a camera line so the men topside can see what you see. That umbilical is your life, all of it. Every bit of your life for those hours is inside a hose the width of my wrist, and the bellman feeds it out to you and takes it back in, and if it snags, if it kinks, if the hot water stops, you have a very small number of minutes to fix it, or get back to the bell before the North Sea takes you apart. I am telling you all of this so you understand I was not a nervous man down there. 11 years. I had done deeper, I had done worse weather. I had once spent 40 minutes in zero visibility, feeling my way along a jacket leg by hand because a current had stirred the bottom into brown soup, and I had come up and eaten a plate of cold pasta and gone to sleep. The dark did not bother me. The dark was just the office. Let me tell you about the days before, so you know what kind of ordinary I was living in when it went wrong. We had been in the pot 9 days by then. 9 days is nothing on a long saturation job, but it is long enough that you have settled into the strange little world of it. 3 of us in a tube, not much bigger than a caravan, breathing helium, our voices gone to cartoons, our sense of smell mostly dead, our food coming in through a lock and going out the same way. You learn a man fast in a place like that. I knew that Sindri snored and got homesick and kept a photo of a girl in Bergen taped inside his bunk. I knew that Baz did not talk much, but hummed old football chants under his breath while he read his paperbacks, the same 3 chants, over and over, until you wanted to strangle him and then somehow found it comforting. And I knew Douglas, or thought I did, the old bellman in the next chamber over most nights, a man who had been doing this since before I was born and who I would have followed to the bottom of any ocean in the world, and did, and would again. The one good thing about the pot was the satellite call. Once every couple of days, if the weather let the ship keep its link, they would patch a call through to the chamber, and a man could talk to his people topside. Most of the lads called their wives or their girlfriends or their mothers. I called Elsie. I had called her the evening before the dive. She was 7, and it was near her bedtime in Newcastle, and her mother had put her on the phone, and Elsie's voice had come into the chamber through the little speaker, small and bright and squeaky because of the helium in my end, what she thought was the funniest thing in the world. "Daddy, why do you sound like a duck?" she said. "Because I'm very far down in the sea, love, and the air down here makes everybody sound like a duck. Are there fish where you are?" "Loads of them, great big ones, and little ones with lights on them, further down." "With lights on them?" "With lights on them. Little lights, like torches, so they can see in the dark." She thought about that. She was quiet a moment, the way she got when she was really turning a thing over, and then she said, in a smaller voice, "Isn't it scary, being that far down in the dark?" And I remember I laughed, my stupid duck laugh, and I said, "No, love, it's not scary, it's just the dark. There's nothing in the dark but water and me and the fish. Nothing to be scared of at all." I told my daughter there was nothing in the dark, the night before it reached up out of the dark and took hold of my life. I have thought about that more times than I can count. That I told her, in my duck voice, with a smile on my face, that there was nothing down there to be scared of. And then I said goodnight, and I told her I loved her to the moon and back, which is what we said, and she said it back, "To the moon and back, Daddy." And her mother took the phone and said the usual few words, "Careful and tired," two people who had loved each other and did not anymore, trying to be kind for the sake of the child, and then the call ended, and the chamber was just the chamber again, 3 men, and the hum of the gas and the low tick of the steel. I lay in my bunk that last night before the dive, and I thought about Elsie, the way I always did after a call, the sweet ache of it, hearing her and not being able to reach her. And I made myself the promise I made every trip, one more contract, this one and no more, then a shore job, and home, and being her dad for real. I fell asleep believing it, the way I fell asleep believing it every trip, and in the morning I climbed into the bell, and it was an ordinary morning, and it was the last ordinary morning I would have for a long time. So, when the gas smelled like copper, I noticed it, and I filed it, and I kept working. The job on the Vestland was pipeline. There was a section of oil pipeline running along the seabed that had developed a fault, a leak, or a stress crack, and my crew was down there to expose a length of it, cut out the bad section, and fit a clamp. Standard, boring, even, which is the best kind of job. Boring means nobody dies. I was the diver that shift. The bellman was a Scot named Douglas Aird, 51 years old, 20-something years in the game, a man who had forgotten more about the water than most of us would ever learn. He tended my umbilical from inside the bell with the patience of a man fishing a river he had fished his whole life. Topside, running the dive from the control room on the ship, was our supervisor, a Welshman named Ammer Price. Those were the 2 voices in my ear. Douglas close and warm, right there at the top of the umbilical. Emir thin and distant, coming down the wire from the world of air and rain and coffee I could not remember properly anymore. I trusted Douglas more than I have ever trusted any man in my life, and I want to say why, because it matters for what came after. A bellman holds your life in his hands in a way no one topside ever can. He is the one who feeds your hose and takes it in. He is the one who comes out the hatch after you if it goes wrong, the one who drags you back into the bell dead or alive. And there is a thing that happens between a diver and a good bellman over enough hours in the dark. You stop being 2 men on 2 ends of a hose. You become one thing with a length of ocean in the middle of it. He feels what you feel through the line. You know he is there the way you know your own hand is there. Douglas had tended me for the better part of 2 years, on and off, on jobs all over the North Sea, and I had come to feel his steadiness at the other end of my umbilical the way a child feels a father in the next room. So when Douglas Aird went thin at the edge, I knew before my own eyes told me that something in the world had come loose, because Douglas did not go thin at the edge. Douglas was the wall the rest of us leaned on. The pipeline lay in front of me like a road with no end. When my helmet light hit it, It threw back a dull gleam through the marine growth, all the weed and anemones and soft coral that had colonized it in the years it had been down there. I was working a section they had already water jetted clear, blasting the seabed away to expose the pipe, and I was setting up the cutting frame. It is exactly as tedious as it sounds. You clamp the frame to the pipe, you align it, you check it again because if the cut is off, you are down there twice as long, and the men in the pot with you get short with you, and Amir gets short with you, and the client gets a bill. I had the frame half clamped when Douglas said, in my ear, "Cole, you moving the umbilical yourself?" "No," I said, my cartoon voice. "I'm on the frame, both hands." "Aye," Douglas said, and then nothing. I want to be precise about this because it is the first thing, the first wrong thing, and everything after grew out of it. When Douglas tended the umbilical, he could feel me through it, the way you can feel a fish through a line. Every move I made pulled a little slack or asked for a little more, and he read those pulls without thinking about them, the same way you know your own hand is asleep before you look at it. He had asked me if I was moving the umbilical because he had felt it move, felt slack go out of it, felt something take up the line that was not me. But I was on the frame, both hands, boots planted in the trench. Probably a snag on the pipe, Amir said from topside, bored, drinking his coffee 300 and some feet above me in the light. "Aye, probably," said Douglas. "We left it. You leave a lot of things down there. The sea is full of small, unexplained tugs and shifts and sounds, and if you chased every one of them, you would never get a foot of work done, and you would go mad besides." I finished clamping the frame. I aligned the cut. Amir talked me through the checklist in my ear, and I answered him, and the numbers were good, and I started the hydraulic cutter, and the pipe began to open under the blade with a vibration I could feel in my teeth. That was when my light went dark. Not off, dark. There is a difference, and I need you to hear it. When a dive light fails, it fails. It is there, and then it is gone, and you are in the black. This was not that. The light was still on. I could see the filament of it, the bulb still burning inside the housing, but the beam of it stopped about 2 feet in front of my faceplate as if it had hit a wall, as if the water in front of me had gone thick. The pipe I had been cutting a second ago was gone into that thickness. My own hands on the cutter were at the very edge of it, half lit and half swallowed, and beyond my wrists there was nothing. "Losing my light," I said. My voice came out level. 11 years. Beams cutting out at about 2 feet. Bulbs still lit. "Say again," Amir said. "Not bored now." "My beam's dying at 2 feet in front of me. Water's gone thick or something. Can't see the pipe." A pause. Then Douglas, very quiet, very close. "Come off the cut, Cole. Come on back toward the bell, nice and slow. I'm not done. Come off the cut." There was something in his voice. Douglas Aird had a voice like a stone wall, flat and gray and unbothered. And I had heard that voice stay flat through a flooding scare and a lost bell wire, and the time a young diver from Aberdeen had gotten his hand caught and Douglas had talked him free of it like he was reading a shopping list. I had never once heard it do what it did just then, which was go thin at the edge. Just a little, just enough. I came off the cut. I killed the hydraulics and I let go of the frame and I turned in the trench, or I tried to, and it was then that I understood the thickness was not just in front of me, it was all around. My light stopped at 2 feet in every direction I turned it. I was standing in a bubble of clear water, maybe 4 feet across, and past the skin of it the whole ocean had gone to something the color of strong tea, something that swallowed light and gave nothing back. And I could not see the pipeline, and I could not see the trench, and I could not see the umbilical running back over my shoulder into the dark toward the bell. "Douglas," I said, "I've lost my visual on the umbilical. What's it doing on your end?" There was a silence I did not like. "It's out," Douglas said. "It's fully out, Cole. You've got no slack. You're at the end of it." That was not possible. I had come off the cut and turned. I had taken up slack, not paid it out. To be at the end of my umbilical, I would have had to walk away from the bell, a long way away, and I had not taken a step. My boots had not left the trench. "That's wrong," I said. "I haven't moved. I'm in the trench, Douglas. I'm right where I cut." "You're 40 feet off the bell and near the end of the hose," Douglas said, and the thin edge in his voice had opened into something I can only call fear, in a man I would have sworn had none left in him. "I've been feeding you out for 2 minutes. I thought you were tracking the pipe. Cole, have you not been walking?" "I haven't taken a step." The gas in my helmet smelled like copper, thick copper now, like I had a mouthful of blood, and somewhere out past the 2-foot wall of my light, out in the tea-colored dark where the umbilical ran that I could not see, something took hold of the hose and pulled. The pull came through the umbilical and into my body because the umbilical was clipped to a harness around my chest and hips, and when it yanked, I went with it, off my feet, dragged a body length across the seabed before I got my hands down and stopped myself. Silt boiled up around me, though I could not see it, only feel the grit of it against my faceplate. My light still made its little useless bubble. I was on my knees in the trench and the hose ran off into the dark ahead of me, taut as a fence wire, humming. "Something's on my umbilical," I said, and I did not recognize my own voice, high and warped by the helium, and gone to a place I did not like. "Douglas, something is pulling my umbilical. It's got the hose. I'm being dragged." "I've got you," Douglas said. "I've got the inboard end. I'm holding you. I'm not letting go. Do you hear me? I have you." And I felt it. I felt him take up the strain from the bell end, felt myself caught between two forces, the thing in the dark ahead and Douglas aired behind. And for a second the pulling stopped and I hung there in the middle of it like a knot in a rope in a tug of war. My breath was loud in the helmet. The gas tasted of blood. I got one boot under me, then the other, and I stood, and I faced the direction of the pull because whatever was out there, I was not going to let it have my back. "Talk to me," Emir said from topside, and even 300 feet up his voice was shaking. "Cole, Doug, talk to me. What am I looking at? I've got nothing on the camera but brown." Nobody answered him. There was nothing to say to a man in the light. The pull came again, and this time it did not yank. This time it was slow. It was patient. It was the pull of something that had decided it had all the time in the world, and it drew the umbilical out of Douglas's hands inch by inch, and I felt Douglas fighting it and losing, felt the hose slide, and I was walking now whether I wanted to or not. One dragging step and then another, out of the trench I had cut, and into the flat dark of the open seabed toward whatever was reeling me in. "Come back to the bell," Douglas was saying. "Turn around, Cole. Turn round and walk to me. Follow the hose back. I'll pull. You walk. We'll both pull the same way." I tried. God help me, I tried. I threw my weight backward and hauled on the umbilical with both hands to turn myself around, and for a moment I thought it would work. I got turned halfway. I saw, or thought I saw, a change in the dark behind me that might have been the loom of the bell's floodlight if I could just get closer to it. And then the thing on the far end of my hose simply pulled harder, harder than a current, harder than a winch, harder than anything in that ocean had a right to pull. And my hands came off the hose and I went over backward and it dragged me on my back across the bottom, with the silt roaring up around me and my light spinning uselessly at the roof of the sea. I did the thing you are trained never to do. I reached down to the harness clip where the umbilical joined my body, and I got my fingers on it to release it, because a diver dragged into the black by his own lifeline will at least die free of it, will at least die able to swim. And even as I thought it, I knew it was madness. I knew that cutting loose at 400 feet with no hose meant no gas and no heat and no way home, meant 30 seconds of freedom and then the long, cold nothing. But my hand was on the clip anyway because the animal part of a man does not care about later. "Do not release," Douglas said, and the stone was back in his voice, the wall, the flat gray certainty, and it stopped my hand the way a father's voice stops a child at the edge of a road. "Do not release that clip, Cole Merrick. You keep that hose. Whatever's got the other end, it does not get to take you off your own gas. You hear me? You keep that hose." I kept the hose, The dragging stopped. I lay on my back on the floor of the North Sea, and the silt settled slowly, and my light steadied and made its little bubble, and inside the bubble there was nothing. No pipe, no trench, no thing. Just me and the taut hose running off into the T-dark toward whatever had decided, for now, to stop pulling. It stopped, I said. Aye, said Douglas. I can feel that. Slack's come back. Just a wee bit. What is it, Doug? I was crying, I think. It is hard to know down there. Your face is wet inside the helmet regardless. What's got my hose? I don't know. Douglas said, and that was the worst thing he could have said, because Douglas Aird knew everything about the water, and if he did not know, then it was a thing that should not have been in the water at all. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. You're going to get on your feet, and you're going to follow the hose home, hand over hand if you have to. And I'm going to pull, gentle, and we're going to walk you back to that bell, and we are not going to hurry, because if we hurry, it'll pull, and we do not want it to pull. Slow and quiet, like it's not there. Can you do that? Yeah. On your feet then, son. I got on my feet. My legs did not want to hold me. I found the hose with both hands, and I turned myself to face the direction of the slack, which was the direction of the bell, which was home, and I took one step. The hose slid a little through my gloves. Douglas took it up. I took another step. And the whole time, the whole way, I could feel the far end of the umbilical resting in something out there in the dark, the way you can feel a weight on a fishing line even when the fish is holding still. A presence, a mass, waiting, not gone, just waiting to see what I would do. I want to tell you about the walk back, but there is not much to tell that would sound like anything. It was maybe 40 feet. It took, Emmer told me later, 19 minutes. 19 minutes to cross 40 feet of seabed. Every step I took, Douglas took up an arm's length of hose. Every step, I felt the thing at the other end let me go a little, feed me a little slack, the way a cat lets a mouse run 3 inches before it decides whether to bother. I did not talk. Douglas did not talk except to say, once a minute or so, in that flat gray wall of a voice, good, another, good, another. Emmer Topside did not talk at all, and I found out later he had his hand over his mouth the whole time, and the client's man in the control room had left the room and been sick in the passageway. But there are 2 things from that walk that I have never forgotten, and I will give them to you because they are the truest part of the whole night. The first is the cold. My hot water suit was still working, the pump on the ship still driving warm water through the little hoses woven into my thermals, and it should have kept me at a decent temperature the whole way. But somewhere in the middle of that walk, the water in my suit went cold. Not because the pump failed. Emmer had eyes on the pump, and the pump was running fine, pushing warm water down the line the whole time. The water going into my suit was warm, and the water in my suit was cold, and there is no way for those 2 things to both be true, and yet they were. It was as if the cold of the thing out there, the cold of the deep place it had come up from, was reaching down my umbilical the same way it had reached down to pull me, cooling the water in my suit through no mechanism that any engineer could later name. I walked the last 20 feet with a chill in my chest like a hand laid flat against my heart from the inside, and I have felt that particular cold twice more in my life since, and both times I will tell you about before I am done. The second thing is what Douglas said, near the end, when the bell was in sight and I had 10 feet to go. He said it low, off the main comms, on the private channel between the bell and the diver, the one that does not get logged, and I have wondered ever since whether he meant for anyone to hear it, even me. He said, "Don't let it learn your name." I did not understand him then. I thought he was rambling, an old man frightened past sense. I said, "What?" and he did not answer. He only said good, another good, and got me up the ladder and into the bell. It was days later, in the chamber, in the dark, when the voice came, that I understood what he had meant, and by then it was too late, because it already had. It had been listening on the open comms the whole time, and it had heard Emmer say my name, and Douglas say my name, again and again. "Cole, Cole, come off the cut, Cole, I've got you, Cole." It had my name, and a thing like that, once it has your name, has a thread that runs from it to you, and it can follow that thread up out of any depth in the world. Somewhere around the halfway point, my light began to work again. It came back the way it had gone, not a switch, but a thinning, the T-dark loosening its grip, the beam reaching 3 feet, 5 feet, 10. And there, ahead of me at the edge of it, was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life, which was the underside of the diving bell lit up in the floods, hanging in the water like a little steel moon, and Douglas's face in the porthole watching me come. And that is when I made the mistake of looking back. I do not know why I did it. I had spent 19 minutes not looking, keeping my eyes forward, keeping my light forward, following the hose home like a good boy. And with the bell right there, with home right there, some part of me had to know, had to see what had held the other end of my life for 19 minutes. So near the bottom of the ladder, with Douglas already reaching to help me in, I turned my helmet and I pointed my light back the way I had come. The umbilical ran off across the seabed the way it should, a black line curving away into the dark. And at the very end of my beam, at the exact place where the light gave out, where I had been standing when the water went thick, the hose lifted up off the bottom. It rose. 10 feet of it, 15, lifting straight up into the black as if it were being drawn up over the edge of something, the way a rope goes over the lip of a well. Up and up, out of the reach of my light, to whatever the far end of it was resting in. And I understood, with a certainty I have never been able to argue myself out of in the years since, that I was not looking at something on the bottom of the sea. I was looking at something that had come up out of a deeper bottom than the one I was standing on, something that had come up to the floor of my ocean the way I had come down to it, a visitor from further down. And the thing my umbilical was resting in, up there at the top of that rising line of hose, was as far above the seabed to it as the seabed was above the crush and dark of the true deep. It had leaned up out of its own night to look at the small, warm thing crawling on the roof of it. Cole, Douglas had my harness. He was hauling me up onto the bell stage. "Cole, don't look. Get in the bell." I got in the bell. Douglas hauled the hatch and dogged it, and we sat on the cold steel floor of that little can with our backs against the wall, and I shook so hard my teeth clattered against the demand valve. And Douglas Aird put his arm around me, an old Scot who had never so much as shaken my hand in 9 days, and he held on to me while the bell came up. Here is a thing about the bell that nobody tells you. It does not come straight up. It comes up on a wire, hauled by a winch, and the ship is on the surface riding the weather, and the weather that night was building, a proper North Sea blow coming in from the northwest. And so the wire that held us jerked and surged as the ship rolled, and the bell swung and shuddered on the end of it all the long way up through 400 feet of black water. 20 minutes, more, of hanging in that shuddering steel egg with the dark pressing on the portholes. And the whole way up, something kept pace with us. I did not see it. I want to be clear. I did not put my face to the porthole and see a face looking back, and I am glad, because I do not think I would have come back from that. What I felt, what Douglas felt too, because he gripped my arm tighter every time it happened, was pressure, a change in the water outside the bell. You spend enough time in one of those cans and you learn its voice, the ticks and groans of the steel, the note the wire makes, the particular quality of the silence. And every so often on the way up, the silence outside the bell got heavier. The steel around us made a sound it should not make, a long, low complaint, the way a hull complains when something large passes close underneath it. And then it would ease, and the bell would rise a little more, and then it would come again, closer. It was rising with us. Whatever had held my hose was following the bell up through the water, keeping to the dark just past the reach of our lights, matching us foot for foot, patient, curious, in no hurry at all. And I sat on the floor and Douglas held my arm and neither of us said one word about it because there was nothing to do about it. because we were in a steel can on a wire, and if it decided to close that last little distance, there was not one single thing in the world either of us could do, and we both knew it, and talking would only have made it real in a way that neither of us could have survived. There was one moment on the way up that I will carry to my grave. The bell has portholes, small thick ports of glass set into the steel, and they show you nothing on the way up but black water and the drift of your own bubbles rising past. I had my back to the wall and my knees drawn up, and I was not looking at the ports. I was looking at the floor, at my own hands, at anything but the black. And Douglas, across from me, was looking at a port. I saw his face change. I saw him go still in a way that a man goes still when he has decided not to move, not to breathe, not to draw the eye of a thing that has not quite seen him yet. I did not turn my head. I have thanked God for that 1,000 times. But I could not help it. My eyes went to the port that Douglas was looking at, the one just past his shoulder, and in the black beyond the glass there was a light. It was faint. It was far off, or it seemed far off, a soft blue-green glow out in the water, the kind of light that Elsie had asked me about, the little fish with lights on them, the ones that live in the deep dark and carry their own small lamps so they can see, except this light was not small, and it was not a fish. It hung in the black off the side of the bell, and it kept pace with us as we rose, steady, patient, and it was the size, as near as I could judge from a thing with no edge to it, of a doorway, of a door standing open in the dark, and the light did not shine outward the way a lamp shines. It was the light of something that had a little light in it, deep inside, the way the deepest fish have, the way a thing that has lived its whole life, where no sun has ever reached, learns to make a little glow of its own out of nothing but chemistry and hunger. It was a lure. I understood that even then. It was the soft blue-green glow that a deep thing dangles in front of itself to bring the smaller, warm things close enough to take. And it was hanging outside the porthole of my bell, keeping pace, glowing softly, patient as the tide, waiting for one of us to be drawn to the light. Douglas moved. Slowly, without taking his eyes off the port, he reached up and he found the little switch that killed the interior lamp of the bell, and he turned it off, and the inside of the bell went dark, so that there was no warm light inside for the thing outside to be drawn to, no glow of us to answer the glow of it. And in that darkness we sat, the two of us, not moving, not speaking, watching that soft blue-green light hang in the water off our port and rise with us, foot for foot, up through the black. I do not know how long it stayed. Time does not work right in the dark. But at some point I realized the glow had faded, or fallen behind, or gone out, and there was only the ordinary black at the port again, and Douglas let out a breath and turned the bell lamp back on, and neither of us said one word about the light, then or ever, because there were no words in either of us that could hold it. At 200 feet it stopped following. I felt it go. The heaviness in the water fell away all at once, like a held breath let out, and the bell rose up clean and light, and the steel stopped complaining, and there was only the ordinary shudder of the wire and the ordinary black. Douglas felt it too. His grip on my arm eased. He let out a long breath through his nose. "It's away," he said. "How do you know?" "I don't, but it's away." He was right. It was away. We came up the last 200 feet with nothing beside us, and the bell broke the underside of the ship and mated to the sat system with a great clanging and hissing. And hands hauled the bell hatch and the trunk hatch, and the pressure equalized between the bell and the chamber where we lived. And I climbed through the trunk into the pot on my hands and knees, into the warm stink of 3 men living in a steel tube for 9 days, and I have never in my life been so glad of a smell. I lay on the floor of the chamber for a while before I could make my body do anything at all. The steel was warm from the 3 of us living in it, warm and close and stinking of men and old food and the faint sweet reek of the gas, and I pressed my cheek against it and I breathed. I thought about nothing. That is a mercy the body gives you sometimes after a bad thing, a few minutes of nothing, before the mind comes back and starts asking its questions. I had those few minutes, and then the questions came, and the first of them was the one I could not answer and have never been able to answer, which was simply, what walked me 40 feet when I never took a step? Because that is the part that no light and no report and no drink has ever put to rest. It was not that a thing pulled my umbilical. Things pull umbilicals, currents, snags, the ordinary hazards of the trade. It was that the log showed 40 feet of hose paid out while my depth gauge never changed by a foot and my heading never changed by a degree. My body did not move. My gauges swore to it. And yet I ended up 40 feet from the bell at the end of my line, in a part of the seabed I had never walked to, with the trench I had cut nowhere in sight. It was as if the sea itself had slid past me while I stood still, as if the thing out there had reached out and pulled the whole floor of the ocean under my boots like a rug, drawing me toward it without my ever taking a step. I have talked to physicists about it, drunk, in the years since. I have talked to a priest about it once, sober. Nobody has a shape to put it in. There is no box on any form, in any discipline, for a man standing still who is nonetheless carried 40 feet into the dark. The other two divers were up, of course. You cannot have a diver dragged across the seabed by God knows what and keep it quiet from the men he lives with. They were a Norwegian called Sindre and a big, quiet Geordie called Baz, and they got me out of my hot water suit and out of my thermals and into a dry set, and they put a mug of tea in my hands that had come in through the medical lock, and it was lukewarm the way everything was in there. And I drank it, and I could not stop shaking, and nobody made me talk. Emir came on the comms from the control room. His voice through the little speaker in the chamber was thin and wrong, and he said the dive was aborted, obviously, and the client had been informed, and there would be an investigation. And were we all right? And I said I was, and Douglas said we were, and Emmer said, in a voice that told me he had heard everything, and believed none of it, and could not unhear it either. What the hell was down there, Doug? You reviewed the umbilical logs? Douglas said. A pause. Aye. Then you know what I know. Cole didn't walk. The hose paid out and he didn't take a step. 40 feet of hose went out and his depth reading never changed and his heading never changed. That's on the log. You explained it to me and I'll thank you for it. Emmer did not explain it. Nobody ever explained it. There is a report somewhere in a filing system in Aberdeen that says the incident on the Vestland was likely caused by an equipment fault leading to diver disorientation, and every man who was on comms that shift knows that is a lie, and every man who signed it knows it is a lie, and it is a lie anyway, because the alternative could not be written down. You cannot put in an incident report that a thing came up out of the deep and took hold of a man's lifeline and reeled him in and let him go again for reasons of its own. There is no box on the form for that. Now, here is the part I have never told anyone, and the reason I am telling it now. When you have been in saturation, you cannot just come up. Your body is pressurized to the depth you have been working. If you came straight to the surface, your blood would froth like a shaken bottle and it would kill you screaming, so you decompress, slowly, over days. The chamber pressure is bled down a little at a time, a few feet a day, while you live in there and eat and sleep and wait, and your body sheds the gas out of your tissues an inch at a time, and it takes the better part of a week to bring a man back up from 400 feet, which meant that after that dive, after what had happened on the seabed, the four of us had to stay in that chamber, sealed in, decompressing, for 6 more days. 6 days. The first day was all right. We were shaken and quiet and we slept a lot, and the storm rolled the ship and we lay in our coffin bunks and listened to it, and nobody said anything about the dive because there was nothing to say. Sindri and Baz gave me room. Douglas kept an eye on me the way an old dog keeps an eye on a young one that has been hurt. Emmer checked in on comms more than he needed to. It was, considering, all right. It was on the second night that I heard it in the pipes. The sat chamber is fed by pipes, gas pipes, water pipes, the lines that carry our breathing mix and our lukewarm water and our lukewarm food, all running out of the chamber and up through the ship to the surface. And that second night, Lying in my bunk in the dark with the others asleep around me, I heard something move in the pipes. Not water, not the click and tick of metal changing temperature. Something that moved slow and heavy and deliberate through the lines, from somewhere below the ship, up, a long, slow, sliding sound, coming up the pipes toward the chamber where we lay sealed in our little pressurized world. I told myself it was the storm. I told myself it was the ship working in the swell. I told myself a great many things, lying there, and I did not believe any of them, because the sound was not the sound of a ship. It was the sound of something patient coming up a long way in the dark, and I had heard that exact quality of patience once before, 40 feet down on the floor of the sea, in the pull on my umbilical. I put my hand flat against the steel wall of the chamber beside my bunk. The steel was cold, and under my palm, faint, so faint I told myself for one whole minute that I was imagining it. The steel was moving, a pressure, coming and going, like something on the far side of it, in the pipes, in the dark, leaning against the wall of my little steel world to feel for the warm thing inside, the way I had leaned against the roof of the sea. I did not sleep the rest of that night. I lay with my hand against the wall and I felt the pressure come and go, slow as breathing, and toward morning it faded, and by the time Baz woke up and started the kettle, it was gone entirely. And in the light of the chamber, and the ordinary business of 4 men waking up in a can, I told myself I had dreamed it. I want to tell you a little about my life topside, because the second day of that decompression I started thinking about it, hard, the way a man thinks about the thing he is trying not to lose. I have a daughter. Her name is Elsie, and she was 7 that year, and she lived with her mother in a town outside Newcastle, in a house I paid the mortgage on but did not live in, because her mother and I had split up 2 years before over exactly the thing that had put me on the floor of the North Sea, which was that I was never there. I was in a can in the ocean 5 months out of 12. I missed birthdays. I missed a Christmas. I missed the whole autumn. Elsie learned to swim, and her mother sent me a video of it to the ship, and I watched it on my phone in the chamber and cried where the other men could not see. And that was the beginning of the end of us, that video, though neither of us knew it then. I did the job for the money. That is the whole of it, and I am not ashamed of it. A saturation diver makes more in a month than most men make in 6, because the work is dangerous and specialized, and there are not many who can do it. And I did it so that Elsie could have the house and the swimming lessons and the school she liked, and a mother who did not have to work 2 jobs. I did it so my daughter would not want for anything. And the cost of that was that I was never in the same room as her, and I told myself every trip that this was the last big contract, that I would take a shore job, that I would be a father who came home. And every trip the money was too good and the shore jobs paid 1/3 of it and I signed on again. You tell yourself you are doing it for the family, and you are, and the doing of it takes you away from the family. That is the trap, and I was deep in it, deeper than 400 feet, and I knew it, and I could not climb out. So on the second day of the decompression, lying in that can, what I thought about was Elsie. I thought, I have to get home to her. I thought, whatever that was down there, whatever is in the pipes at night, I have to get up out of this ocean and home to my girl, because if I do not, then all of it was for nothing. All the missed birthdays and the ended marriage, all of it, for a house she will grow up in without a father. And that thought, that I might not get home, put a fear in me worse than the fear on the seabed. On the seabed I had been afraid of dying. In the chamber I became afraid of dying for nothing. The 3rd night it came again. It came earlier this time, and it stayed longer. The sliding in the pipes, the slow, patient weight moving up through the lines toward us, and the pressure against the wall by my bunk, coming and going. But there was a new thing the 3rd night, and the new thing was the worst thing that happened in that whole business, worse than the seabed, and I have never been able to explain it to myself. The comms crackled. The chamber has a comms panel, a speaker and a microphone that connect us to the control room topside where Emmer and the others run the dive. At night it is quiet. but it is never fully off. There is always a faint hiss of an open line, the sound of the room upstairs where a duty man sits through the small hours. And on the third night, deep in the dark, with the sliding sound in the pipes and the pressure against my wall, the comms speaker crackled, and a voice came out of it. It was Elsie's voice. It said, "Daddy?" I was up out of my bunk before I knew I had moved. I stood in the dark chamber with the others sleeping around me, and I stared at the comms panel with its little green light, and I could not breathe, because it was her. It was my daughter's voice, 7 years old, the exact pitch of it, the exact way she said "Daddy" with a question mark on the end when she was not sure I was there, the way she said it into the phone when her mother handed it to her on the ship's satellite call, that small, hopeful, uncertain sound, "Daddy, are you there?" And it had come out of a comms speaker connected to a control room on a ship in the North Sea in the middle of the night, where my 7-year-old daughter could not possibly be. "Daddy, I can't find you." I did not answer it. I want that on the record, whatever record this is. I did not answer it. Because some cold, clear part of me, some part that had survived 19 minutes on the seabed and knew what patience sounded like, understood exactly what was happening. The thing in the pipes had listened. On the seabed it had felt for the warm thing in the water. In the chamber it had felt for the warm thing in the steel. And somewhere in 3 nights of leaning against my wall, feeling my heart, feeling my fear, it had found the shape of the thing I was most afraid of losing, and it had learned to make that shape with sound. It did not know what Elsie was. It only knew she was the door into me, and it was knocking on that door, in her voice, in the dark, to see if I would open it. "Daddy, I'm cold. It's so cold down here. Come and find me." I put my hands over my ears. I am a grown man, and I stood in a steel can at the bottom of the sea with my hands over my ears like a child, and I said, under my breath, over and over, "She is in Newcastle. She is in her bed. She is warm and safe and asleep in Newcastle. This is not her. This is not her. This is not her. Why won't you come? You always go away. You always go away, and I wait and wait." That was the cruelest thing, because that was true. That was the truest thing anyone had ever said to me, and it was being said in my daughter's voice by a thing that had climbed up out of the deep to say it. And it knew. God help me. It knew exactly where the wound was, because I had been leaking that wound into the water for 3 nights straight. All my guilt and all my fear. And it had drunk it up and turned it into a little girl's voice saying, "You always go away." Douglas woke up. I do not know what woke him. Maybe the sound of me. Maybe he heard it too. But I felt his hand on my shoulder in the dark, and I nearly came out of my skin, and his flat gray voice said, very low, so as not to wake the others, "Cole, what is it? Do you hear it?" I whispered. "The comms. Do you hear it?" Douglas was quiet a moment, listening, and the comms crackled, and Elsie's voice said, "Daddy, who's that with you? Make him go away. I want you to come find me." And I felt Douglas go rigid beside me in the dark. "I hear a bairn," he said slowly. "A wee lass. It's my daughter's voice. It's not your daughter." "I know it's not my daughter." "Then you know what to do about it," Douglas said, and his hand tightened on my shoulder, hard, an old man's grip but strong as a winch, the same as on the bottom. "You do not answer it. You do not release the clip, and you do not answer the voice. Whatever it's got no more than it had on the seabed, which is the far end of a line, and it cannot come up the line unless you pull it up, so you don't pull. You lie down in your bunk, and you put the pillow over your head, and you think about that lass safe in her bed in Newcastle, and you do not answer. It'll go when it sees you'll not answer. It went on the bottom, it'll go here, but you have to not answer it, Cole. Do you understand me? You have to let it call all night and not answer, no matter what it says, no matter whose voice it says it in." I did what he said. I lay down in my coffin bunk and I put the pillow over my head and I thought about Elsie safe in her bed, her real bed, in the real house in Newcastle, with her nightlight on because she did not like the full dark. And I held that picture in my mind the way I had held the umbilical, with everything I had, and I did not let go of it, and I did not answer the voice. The voice called for a long time. It went through everything. It was Elsie crying. It was Elsie angry, saying, "I hate you. You're never here." It was Elsie's mother, my ex-wife, saying, "You did this. You brought this on us. This is what happens when you're never home." It was, once, near the end, a voice I had not heard in 20 years, my own mother, dead since I was 19, saying my name the way she used to when I was small and had a fever, saying, "Cole, love, Cole, come here to me." And that one nearly broke me. That one had me half out of the bunk before Douglas's hand came down on my chest and pinned me flat, and his voice in my ear said no. And I lay back down and I put the pillow over my head and I did not answer. Toward morning, the voice grew fainter. The sliding in the pipes drew back down, away, into whatever depth it had climbed up from. The pressure against my wall faded. And the last thing I heard, so faint it might have been the hiss of the open line and nothing more, so faint I have spent years telling myself it was only that, was Elsie's voice. My daughter's real voice, as near as I could tell, small and disappointed and tired, saying, "Okay, Daddy, I'll wait." And then the line was just the line, the empty hiss of an ordinary control room at 4 in the morning, and it did not speak again. We had 3 more days of decompression, 3 more days sealed in that can, coming up a few feet at a time, and I did not sleep more than an hour or 2 at a stretch the whole rest of it, and neither, I noticed, did Douglas. We did not talk about it in the day. There is a kind of thing you cannot talk about in the light, that only exists in the dark and dissolves if you try to hold it up to the chamber lamps. And we both knew that if we started talking about it in the day, we would both have to admit we believed it, and admitting that in a steel can you cannot leave for 3 more days was more than either of us could afford. So we drank our lukewarm tea and we played cards with Sindre and Baz, who slept easy in those days and thought I was just badly shaken by the seabed, and we counted down the feet. But it was not done with us. I know now that it was only feeling for the edges of us, one at a time, and it had 3 more nights to do it in. The 4th night it did not use the voice. It tried something else. I was lying in my bunk, not asleep, never really asleep in those days, when the light in the chamber changed. We slept with a dim red night lamp on, the kind that lets you see enough to climb down to the head without waking the others, and that red light was the whole of the world in the dark. And on the 4th night the red light dimmed. It did not go out. It dimmed the way a torch dims when the battery is failing, except this lamp ran off the ship's power and did not have a battery to fail. It dimmed until the chamber was the color of old blood, and then dimmer, until I could barely make out the edge of the bunk above mine, and I understood that the thing had found a new door, that it had learned that what frightened me most after the voice was the dark, the deep dark of the seabed, and it was reaching into my chamber to pull the light down out of the air and give me the dark instead. I lay very still. I did not reach for the lamp. Douglas had taught me that much, that you do not answer, that you do not chase the thing it offers you, and I understood that reaching for the lamp, showing it that the dark frightened me, was a kind of answering. So I lay still in the near dark and I breathed slow and I thought about the swimming pool in Newcastle, the bright chlorine light of it, the shouting and the splashing. Elsie's face when she came up out of the water. I filled my head with light so that the dark in the chamber could not get in. And after an hour, or 2, or 3, the red lamp came slowly back up to its ordinary dimness, and the chamber was the chamber again, and I heard Douglas, in the bunk below mine, let out a long, slow breath, and I knew he had been awake through all of it too, holding his own light against the dark, and neither of us said a word. The 5th night was the bad one. I have to tell it plainly because there is no way to dress it up. The 5th night, Sindre heard it. Sindre was the Norwegian, a big, cheerful, easy young man who had slept through everything, who thought I was rattled and Douglas was tired and that was the end of it. And on the 5th night, deep in the small hours, Sindre sat up in his bunk in the near dark and said, in a voice I had never heard him use, thick and slow and strange, "Who is that? Who is calling me?" I came awake all the way at once. Douglas came off the bunk below me, and in the red dark I could see Sindre sitting up, his head cocked toward the pipes on the far wall, listening, and on his face was the loose, slack look of a man listening to something a long way off and very sweet. "They're saying my name," Sindre said. My mother is saying my name. She is down there. She has been down there the whole time and no one told me." He put his feet down out of the bunk toward the floor. He was reaching, in the dark, toward the comms panel, toward the pipes, toward the sound only he could hear. "I have to answer her. She is waiting. She sounds so cold." Douglas got to him before I did. He got both hands on Sindri's shoulders and he pushed him back and he put his face close to Sindri's face and he said, in that flat gray wall of a voice that had stopped my own hand on the seabed, "Sindre, look at me. Your mother is in Bergen. Your mother is in her house in Bergen, and it is the middle of the night and she is asleep in her bed. That is not your mother. Do not answer it. Do you hear me, lad? Do not answer it." "But she sounds so cold," Sindre said, and there were tears running down his big open face, and I understood then that it did not need a real grief to work with, that it had found something in Sindre too, some ordinary tenderness, a boy who loved his mother, and it had reached down into that and pulled it up into a wound the same as it had done with me. It did not care what the wound was, it only cared that there was one. We held him. The two of us held Sindre down in his bunk in the red dark for the better part of an hour while the thing in the pipes called him in a voice he would not tell us the words of, and we talked to him the whole time. The two of us, saying she is in Bergen, she is asleep, this is not her, do not answer, and slowly, the slack look went off his face and the tears dried and his eyes came back to the chamber, to us, to the ordinary red-lit steel, and he said, in his own voice, small and frightened, "What was that? Cole, Douglas, what was that?" "Nothing," Douglas said. "A bad dream. Go back to sleep." But none of us went back to sleep, and in the morning Sindre would not look at the pipes, and he sat on the far bench with his knees drawn up, and I understood that whatever the thing had been to me on the seabed, it was no longer only mine. It had come up out of the deep with the four of us, and it was learning us, one at a time, feeling for the door in each of us, and there were still 2 nights to go. On the last day, the chamber pressure came down to match the surface, and there was a moment, a specific moment I will never forget, when the pressure equalized and my voice came back. The helium clears out of your tissues as you decompress, and the last of it goes and your voice drops back down out of the cartoon register into your own voice. Your real voice, the one your daughter knows. And I said something, I do not even remember what, and it came out of me in my own low, ordinary Geordie voice for the first time in 15 days, and I sat down on the bench in that chamber and I wept like a child, because I sounded like myself again, because I was going home, because I had not answered the voice. They cracked the chamber that afternoon. The hatch swung open and the ordinary air of the ship came in. Cold North Sea air smelling of diesel and salt and rain. And I climbed out of that can on legs that did not work right, and I stood on the deck of the Vestland under a gray sky with the gulls going over, and I was up, I was out, 15 days in the sea, and I was standing on the deck in the wind and it was over. Douglas came out after me. He stood beside me at the rail and we looked out at the water, the ordinary gray heaving water, and neither of us said anything for a while. Then he took out a packet of cigarettes, which we were not supposed to have, and he lit 2 and gave me one, and we smoked them looking at the sea. "You'll not do this again," Douglas said. It was not a question. "No," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in 11 years, I meant it. "Good," he said. "Go home to your lass." That was the last time I saw Douglas Aird. He went off to another job in the Gulf of Mexico 3 weeks later, and I heard, months after, that he had died in his sleep in a hotel in Aberdeen between contracts, his heart just stopping in the night. 51 years old, and I did not go to the funeral because I could not stand in a room full of divers and pretend I did not know what we both knew. I hope he went easy. I hope, wherever an old bellman goes, it was warm there and dry, and the line was slack, and nothing was pulling on the far end of it. I went home to my lass. I quit the sat diving. I took a shore job at a diving school in the Northeast, teaching young men the trade in a training tank you can see the bottom of, in clean, warm, chlorinated water, and it pays a third of what the North Sea paid. And I have never for 1 second missed the money. I moved into a flat 10 minutes from Elsie. I see her 4 days a week now. I take her to school. I was there, this year, when she swam a length of the pool for the first time in a proper race. And I stood at the side and I shouted for her like a madman, and afterward she ran to me dripping, and I picked her up and I held her, my warm living girl, wet and cold and laughing, and I thought, this is what I would not open the door for. This is what it wanted and did not get. Because here is the thing. Here is why I am telling you. Most nights are fine now. Most nights I sleep and I dream of ordinary things, or I do not dream at all, and I wake up in my flat with the light coming in and Elsie coming over for breakfast. And the whole business on the Vestland feels like a story that happened to another man in another life, so far down and long ago that I can almost believe I imagined it. But some nights, usually in the winter, usually when there is a storm rolling in off the North Sea and I can hear the wind working at the windows, I wake up in the dark at 4 in the morning, the exact hour the voice used to fade, and the flat is quiet, and the heating pipes tick in the walls the way heating pipes do. And I lie there and I listen, and under the ticking, so faint I have spent years telling myself it is only the pipes and the wind and an old fear that will not fully die, I hear it. Something moving in the pipes, slow, patient, coming up a long way in the dark, and a small voice, thin as an open line, that says, "Daddy, I'm still here. I'm still waiting." I put the pillow over my head. I think about Elsie safe in her bed, and I do not answer it. I have never answered it, but it has never stopped calling, either. 15 years now, and on the winter nights when the storms come in, it climbs up the pipes, and it knocks on the door with my daughter's voice, and it waits to see if this will be the night I am tired enough, or sad enough, or old enough, to finally answer. One of these nights I am going to be. That is the thing I know that I cannot tell anyone. That is the thing I have carried up out of the sea and cannot put down. It has all the time in the world. It came up from a place so deep that 400 feet is nothing to it, so deep that a human life is a single tide. It can wait 50 years. It can wait until Elsie has children of her own and I am an old man alone in a flat with the pipes ticking, and it will still be there, patient as the deep, calling up the pipes in a little girl's voice. And one night I will be tired, and I will answer. The storm is coming in tonight. I can hear it starting at the windows. So I have written this down, all of it, the whole of it, so that somebody will know, so that it is somewhere outside my own head at last. And now I am going to lie down and put the pillow over my head and think about my daughter safe and warm and asleep across the city, and listen to the pipes and not answer. Not tonight. Story 2. The Deep Set. The first hook came up empty with the bait gone and the leader wrapped 3 times around itself, and Sorensen said that was normal, that a shark had probably worried it loose. And I believed him because I was new, and because I wanted to. The second hook came up the same way, so did the third. By the 10th empty hook, Sorensen had stopped saying anything at all, and that was how I knew, before I knew anything, that something out on the line was wrong. My name is Ray Kessler, and that summer I was 34 years old and I had gone to sea because I had run out of land to run to. I want to be honest about that. I did not go fishing out of some love of the water or some family tradition. I went because I owed a man in Coeur d'Alene $11,000, and because my ex-wife had a lawyer and I did not. and because a boat 40 miles offshore is one of the last places in America where a man with a bad history and no references can make real money, and no one asks him a single question about who he used to be. The Karen Marie was hiring deckhands for the summer albacore and halibut out of a little port on the Oregon coast, cash at the end of each trip, no paperwork past a signature, and I signed the signature and I did not use my middle name, and that was that. I was a fisherman. What I had run from I will not go all the way into, because it is not that kind of story, and because it does not matter next to what found me on the water. It is enough to say there was a marriage that ended badly, and a job that ended worse, and a bad year of drinking in the middle of it, and a man I owed money to who was not the patient kind, and a general sense, by the spring of that year, that I had used up every place that would have me on land and needed to disappear for a while into somewhere that did not keep records. The sea was that place. The sea does not care who you were. That is the thing men like me love about it. Right up until the night it shows you that it does not care who you are either, that to the sea you are exactly what you are to the thing in the deep, which is a small, warm, quick thing making a little light on the roof of the dark, here for one tide and gone. The Karen Marie was a longliner. If you do not know what that is, I will tell you, because it matters. A long line is exactly what it sounds like, a single main line, the ground line, that runs for miles, and off the ground line every few feet hangs a shorter line called a gangion, and on the end of every gangion is a baited hook. You set the whole thing out behind the boat, miles of it, thousands of hooks, and you weight it so it sinks, and you let it lie on the bottom or hang in the deep water for a few hours, and then you come back and you haul it, hook by hook by hook, and you take off whatever the sea has put on it, halibut, mostly, for us, cod, sometimes a shark you did not want, sometimes a skate, flat and gray and cold, that the old hands would curse and throw back, thousands of hooks. You haul them one at a time, over a roller at the rail, and the line comes up dripping out of the black water, and you never know, hook to hook, what is going to break the surface. That not knowing is the whole feeling of the job. It is the thing that gets in your blood, if it gets in your blood at all. Every hook is a small question the sea answers. Most of the answers are nothing, an empty hook, a stripped bait. Some are a fish and money, and a few, a very few, are something you did not ask for. In a whole summer of hauling, I saw a lot of the sea's answers, and most of them were dull, and I got so I could haul for hours in a kind of trance. Hook and nothing, hook and nothing, hook and a fish, hook and nothing. It is not exciting work. It is cold and wet, and it never stops, and your hands crack open, and the salt gets in the cracks. But there is that one thing under it, always, the not knowing what the next hook brings, and I think that is why men keep going back to it long after their bodies tell them to quit. The sea always has one more answer you have not seen yet. We were 4 aboard. Sorensen was the skipper and the owner, a big slow Dane in his 60s with hands like catcher's mitts, and a way of never quite finishing his sentences, as if the important half of every thought stayed inside him, where the weather could not get at it. He had fished that coast for 40 years. He had buried a wife and a business partner, and, I found out later, a son, all of them ashore, none of them at sea, and I think the sea was the one place left where he did not have to think about any of them. Then there was Marv, the old deckhand, 60 if he was a day, a stringy tobacco-colored man who had crewed for Sorensen so long they moved around the deck like an old married couple, never bumping, never speaking, each knowing where the other would be. And there was the kid. The kid was named Petey, and he was 19, and it was his first season, same as me, except where I had come to the boat to disappear, Petey had come to it lit up like Christmas. He loved it. God help him, he loved every miserable, freezing minute of it. He talked constantly about his girl back in Newport, about the truck he was going to buy, about how he was going to work the boats 3 summers and put himself through the community college and be a diesel mechanic and never be broke a day in his life. He had it all mapped out, that kid, at 19, the whole bright, reasonable future of a boy who had never once had the sea answer him with something he did not ask for. I liked him. I did not want to like anyone that summer. I liked Petey anyway. I am telling you about them because I need you to know them a little before this goes where it goes. Because the sea took answers from all four of us that summer, and it matters that they were men, real men, and not just names on a crew list. We had run out 4 days from port that trip, farther than we usually fished. Sorensen had it in his head that the halibut had moved out and down, into deeper water past the shelf, out where the bottom drops away toward the real deep, and where the price per pound made the fuel worth burning. We were fishing the edge of the continental shelf, where the seabed that has been climbing gently down from the coast for 100 miles suddenly falls off a cliff into water 2,000 feet deep, and then deeper, down past where any light has ever reached, down to the flat, cold plain of the true bottom of the sea. Sorensen set the gear right along the lip of that drop, where the deep water comes up against the shelf, and the currents stir the food up off the edge, and the big halibut lie in wait for it. It is good fishing, that edge. It is also, I have come to believe, a kind of door, a place where the shallow world we know rubs up against the deep world we do not, and where, if the conditions are right or wrong, something can come through. We set the gear at dusk, miles of it, thousands of hooks, baited by hand, my hands and Petey's, our fingers gone numb and clumsy with the cold and the wet. An hour of hard, fast work while Sorensen ran the boat along the edge of the drop and Marv fed the line off the stern. Then we let it soak. It was during the soak, that first night on the edge of the drop, that Marv said the thing I did not think about again until it was too late to matter. We were in the galley, the four of us, eating, the boat lying to on the swell with the gear out in the dark behind us. Petey was talking, because Petey was always talking, about how deep the water was under us, how he had looked at the sounder and it read over 2,000 feet, and he had never fished water that deep. How weird it was to think about 2,000 feet of nothing straight down under your boots. What was even down there? And he laughed the easy laugh of a boy for whom the deep was a fun idea and not a real place. And Marv, who did not talk, put down his fork. "You don't fish the edge at night," Marv said. He was not talking to Petey. He was talking to Sorensen. "You know that. You taught me that. 20-odd years ago you told me yourself. We fish the edge. We fish it in the daylight and we're off it by dark. Set in the day, haul in the day, and be up on the shelf in the shallow water by night. You said that to me. And here we are soaking the edge all night in 2,000 feet of water because the price is up." "The price is up," Sorensen said. "The price is always going to be up," Marv said. "That's what the price does. And the reason you gave me, 20 years ago, the reason you don't fish the edge at night, you never did tell me what that reason was. You just said don't. So I'm asking you now, old man. Why don't we fish the edge at night? What did you see, the once, that made you a daylight man for 20 years? And Sorensen looked at his plate, and the important half of his thoughts stayed inside him the way it always did. And he said, after a while, "It was a long time ago. I was young. I probably saw nothing. A young man alone on the water at night sees a lot of nothing and makes it into something." He got up and scraped his plate. "The price is up. We fish it this trip. One trip. Then we go back to the shelf." And he went up to the wheelhouse, and that was the end of it. And Petey rolled his eyes at me like the old men were being old men. And Marv sat there a while longer looking at nothing, and then he took out his knife and started cleaning it. And I did not think about any of it again until the first empty hook came up with its little scrap of pale tissue snagged in the barb. Sorensen had seen it before. That is what I understand now. Whatever came up under us that night, Sorensen had seen the sign of it, or the edge of it, once, when he was young, on the drop, at night. And it had made him a daylight man for the rest of his working life, and he had broken his own rule for the price of halibut, and it had cost him his boat and 2 of his crew, and, I think, in the end, in the house among the firs, the last quiet years of his life, he knew He always knew. He just could not say it, because there are things a man cannot say out loud on a boat in the dark on the edge of the drop, for the same reason you do not say a bear's name in bear country, the old reason. The reason under all the other reasons. We ate. Petey talked about his girl. Marv cleaned his knife. Sorensen stood at the window looking at the water and the last of the light, not saying anything, the important half of his thoughts staying inside, and a few hours after full dark, we started to haul. The haul is a rhythm. The hydraulic hauler pulls the ground line up over the roller at the rail, and it comes dripping out of the black, and the Gangians come up one after another. And your job is to be there when each hook breaks the surface, to gaff whatever is on it if it is worth gaffing, to clear it, to keep the line running. Sorensen ran the hauler. Marv worked the rail beside me. Petey coiled the line into the tubs behind us and rebaited for the next set. It was near midnight when we started, and the deck lights threw a hard white circle onto the black water at the rail, and past that circle there was nothing. No horizon, no stars. Just the boat's little island of light and the enormous dark all around it and under it. 2,000 feet of dark straight down. The first 100 hooks were good. Halibut, some of them big, the flat brown and white slabs of them coming up out of the black and over the roller, and Marv gaffing them and swinging them aboard, and Petey whooping every time a big one came up, and me working the line with my cracked hands, hook and a fish, hook and nothing, hook and a fish. It was a good haul. Sorensen even almost smiled, which for Sorensen was like a normal man throwing a party. Then the empty hooks started. The first one I did not think anything of. An empty hook, the bait gone, the leader wrapped around itself 3 times the way it wraps when something has thrashed on it and worked itself loose. Sorensen said shark, and I believed him. The second one, same thing. Bait gone, leader wrapped. Third, fourth. By the 10th I had stopped believing shark, and so, I could see, had Sorensen, though he did not say so. He just watched the line come up empty, hook after hook, his big, slow face giving away nothing, and his hand rode a little slower on the hauler control. Because here is the thing about the empties. When a shark strips a bait, it takes the bait. It bites it off the hook, and it is gone, and you get back a bare hook. But these hooks were not bare. On every one of them, snagged in the barb, was a little piece of something. Not bait. I did not know what it was at first. It was pale and soft, and it came up on hook after hook, a small, ragged scrap of pale, soft tissue snagged on the barb where the bait had been, as if whatever had taken the bait had left a piece of its own mouth behind, over and over, on hook after hook after hook, all down the line. Marv picked one off with his knife and looked at it in the deck light for a long time. He did not say anything. He was not a man who said things. But I saw him look at it, and I saw him look up the line into the dark where the rest of the gear still lay, hundreds of hooks of it, and I saw something move in his old face that I did not have a name for yet. And then he flicked the little pale scrap over the side and went back to the rail. "Whales," Petey said from behind us, cheerful, coiling line. "Right? Something big's been feeding on our fish." "Whale or a big shark or something cleaned out a whole section. That happens, right?" "That happens," Sorensen said, but he did not say it the way a man says a thing he believes. We kept hauling. The empties ran for a long stretch, 60 or 70 hooks, every one with its little scrap of pale tissue, and then, all at once, they stopped, and the hooks started coming up with fish again. But the fish were wrong. I need to be careful how I say this because it is the first thing I saw with my own eyes that I could not explain away, and I have gone over it 1,000 times to be sure I saw it right, and I did. The first wrong fish was a halibut, a good-sized one, and it came up over the roller and Marv gaffed it and swung it aboard and it hit the deck and lay there in the light, and it was dead. That was the first thing. It was dead and cold and stiff, the way a fish is after it has been dead for a day, not a fish that had been alive on the hook an hour ago in cold water. Halibut come up alive and fighting, mostly, and even the tired ones are fresh and slick and their gills work. This one was dead and stiff, and its eyes were sunk in and dull, and there was a smell coming off it, a low, bad smell like a freezer that has been unplugged for a week, and Marv looked at it and stepped back from it and would not touch it again. The second wrong fish was worse. It was a cod, and it came up dead and stiff and cold like the halibut, but this one had marks on it. All down one side of it, in the pale flesh, there were marks, round marks, each about the size of a silver dollar, in rings, and I stood there in the deck light looking at them, and my skin went cold under my rain gear because I knew what they were. I had seen them in a nature program once, on a whale, on the body of a sperm whale that had gone down into the deep to hunt and come back up scarred. They were sucker marks. The round rings a big squid's suckers leave in the flesh of a thing it has held, except the marks on our cod were not the size of a squid's suckers. They were the size of silver dollars, of coffee cups, of something with arms as thick as my leg, and there were rows of them down the whole side of a fish that had been dead a day and was cold as a stone. A fish that had been hanging on our hook in 2,000 feet of water and had been found there, in the dark, by something that had put its arms around it and marked it and left it for us to haul up into the light. Nobody said anything about the marks. I looked at Marv and Marv looked at me, and neither of us said anything. And Sorensen ran the hauler and looked at the black water and did not look at the fish. And Petey, behind us, was quiet for once. And when I glanced back at him, he had stopped coiling and was standing with a loop of wet line in his hands, looking at the marked cod on the deck, and the Christmas light had gone out of his face for the first time all summer. "What did that?" Petey said. His voice was small. "Nothing," Sorensen said. "Squid. Big squid. Nothing." And he opened up the hauler and the line came faster, faster than we should have run it, and I understood that Sorensen, who had fished this coast for 40 years, who had seen everything the sea had to show a man, wanted this gear up and aboard in this stretch of water behind us as fast as the hauler could pull, and that scared me more than the marks did, because if the sea still had something left that could scare Sorensen, then I did not want to see it. I did not want to see it at all. We hauled fast. The wrong fish kept coming, dead and cold and marked, one after another, and we did not gaff them anymore. We just let them come over the roller and drop to the deck and pile up. Dead fish that had been alive an hour ago, marked with the sign of something huge and patient down there in the dark that had gone along our whole line in the black, hook by hook, finding our fish and marking them and letting them hang, the way a man walks a fence line checking his snares. The last fish before the snag was the one that finished whatever was left of the ordinary in that night. It was a halibut, a big one of the biggest of the trip, and it came up over the roller belly first, and it was dead and cold and marked like the others. The rings of the great suckers down its white belly, but that was not the thing. The thing was that it had been opened. Something had opened it up along the belly, cleanly, the way you would field dress a deer, and taken what was inside, and it had done it not with a bite, not with a ragged tearing of a shark, but neatly, deliberately, a long, clean opening, and then it had left the rest, the good white meat, the whole of the fish, hanging on our hook, taken only the soft insides and left the rest. The way a man takes only the choicest part of a thing and leaves the carcass. Nobody said one word about that fish. Petey had gone dead quiet behind us. Marv had stopped even pretending to work the rail and stood with his knife hanging in his hand, looking not at the fish but out past the deck lights, into the black, into the direction the line ran, up the miles of hooks into the dark. And I understood, we all understood, that whatever was out there was not just feeding. A thing that is only feeding does not open its food neatly and leave the best of it. A thing that opens its food neatly and takes only the soft part and leaves the rest is doing something else, something with intention in it, something that looked, in the deck light, on that opened fish, almost like curiosity, like it had wanted to see what was inside, like it was learning what we were, one fish at a time, all down the line, in the dark, and now it had learned enough. And then the line stopped coming. The hauler strained. Sorensen had it wide open and the ground line came taut out of the black and stood there, thrumming, and the boat leaned toward it, the stern pulled down, and the hauler screamed and the line did not come. We were snagged, or we were hooked into something. On the bottom, 2,000 feet down, our gear had caught on something that did not want to come up, or that was too heavy to lift, and the whole boat heeled toward it as the hauler fought to bring it in. "Slack it," Marv said. First word he'd said in an hour. "Sorensen, slack it off. That's not the bottom." "I know it's not the bottom," Sorensen said quietly. "Then slack it off. Whatever's got it, let it have it. Cut the gear. We'll lose the gear." And Sorensen, who loved that gear, who had paid for every foot of it, who would sooner have lost a finger than a mile of good long line, reached for the control to slack it off and cut it loose. I saw him reach. I want that clear. Sorensen tried to let it go, but it was too late, because that was the moment the line went slack on its own, not slack the way a snag lets go. Slack the way a fish gives you slack when it stops fighting the hook and starts swimming toward the boat. The line went loose all at once, and the boat came back up level, and the hauler, with nothing to fight, spun the loose line up over the roller fast, faster, coil after coil of empty ground line pouring up out of the black and into the tubs, and we all stood there and watched it come, hundreds of feet of it, and I realized what it meant a half-second before it broke the surface. It meant the thing on the end of our line was no longer on the bottom. It meant it was coming up. Sorensen killed the hauler. The line stopped pouring in and hung there over the roller, the last of it trailing down into the black off the stern, and the four of us stood in the hard white circle of the deck lights and looked at the water. And the water looked back at nothing, flat and black and heaving slow, and for a long moment there was no sound at all but the diesel muttering under the deck and the slap of the swell against the hull. Then the deck lights caught something coming up. 2,000 feet is a long way. Whatever was down there had a long way to come, and we watched it come, or we watched the sign of it come, which was this. Far down under the black water, deeper than the deck lights could reach, there was a paleness, a soft, pale glow, faint and green, spread wide, rising. It was not one light. It was many, I understood as it came up, a field of soft, pale points of light spread across something vast, rising up through the black toward the boat, and as it rose the points of light spread wider and wider, so that whatever carried them was opening as it came, unfolding, spreading itself out under the boat, wider than the boat, wider than I could see past the edges of the deck light. A great, slow, soft glowing thing rising up out of the deep and opening like a hand under us. Marv started praying. I did not know he had it in him. Under his breath, fast and low, the old words, and his hands white on the rail. "Get away from the rail," Sorensen said. "All of you, get away from the rail. Get to the house." We got away from the rail. We backed up across the deck toward the wheelhouse, all four of us, the dead-marked fish sliding under our boots, and we watched the pale glow rise and spread. And it came up under the boat until it was just below the surface, and the whole Black Sea around the Karen Marie went soft and pale from underneath, lit up green from below by the thing that hung just under us, so that we stood on our little boat on a floor of soft green light with the black night above and the great glowing thing below, filling the water from edge to edge as far as the deck lights let me see. And I understood that we were not floating on the sea anymore. We were floating on it, on the top of it. It had come up under the boat, and the boat was resting on its back. I am not going to tell you I saw it clearly, because I did not, and because I have come to be glad of that. It was under the surface. The surface moved, and the deck lights threw glare, and it was pale and vast and lit from within, and the shape of it kept changing as it moved. And I could not have drawn you a picture of it if you had put a gun to my head, but I will tell you the parts I did see, the parts that come back to me at 3 a.m. still, 20 years on. I saw an arm come up out of the water. It came up off the port side, out of the pale glow, slow, An arm, if that is the word, thicker than the mast, pale as a drowned thing. And it rose up, dripping into the deck light, and it stood there swaying above the boat, a column of pale flesh rising out of the sea higher than the wheelhouse, and all down the underside of it, in rows, were the round pale discs I had seen the marks of on the cod, each the size of a truck tire, opening and closing slowly, and it swayed there over the boat, tasting the air, tasting the light, the way the head of a snake sways when it is deciding, and then it came down. It came down on the stern, not fast. That is the thing I can never make anyone understand. Not fast, not a strike, nothing you could dodge or fight, just slow, slow and heavy and certain. The pale arm coming down across the stern of the Karen Marie and settling onto the deck with a weight that made the whole boat groan and heel, and where it touched, the discs took hold, and I heard the fish tubs crush, and the rail give way and the rigging tear, and the stern went down under the water under the weight of it, and cold black sea came pouring up the deck toward us. Petey was closest to the stern. I want to tell this part right because the kid deserves it told right. Petey did not freeze. People say you freeze, but Petey did not freeze. When the stern went under and the water came up the deck, Petey turned and ran for the wheelhouse, same as the rest of us, and he almost made it. He was 3 steps from the door, and the water caught his legs and took him off his feet and slid him back down the tilting deck toward the stern, toward the arm, and he grabbed the base of the mast on the way past and stopped himself. And for 1 second, 1 whole second, he was holding on. He had it. His hands were locked around the mast and his eyes found mine across the deck, and he said my name. He said, "Ray," just that, Ray, like I could do something, like there was something I could do. And then a second arm came out of the pale water on the starboard side, quiet, the way the first one had, and it came across the deck and it settled over Petey where he clung to the mast, gentle almost, the way you would cup your hand over a moth, and the discs took hold, and it drew him off the mast and down the deck and into the water without any violence at all, without a splash, without a scream, because there was no time for a scream. One moment the kid was there holding the mast with his whole bright, reasonable future still ahead of him, and the next moment the water closed, pale and green, over the place where he had been, and he was gone, down, into the light, into the deep, and the sea had taken another answer that none of us had asked it for. I did not go after him. I want to say that plainly, because I have had to live with it. There was no going after him. The deck was under water to the wheelhouse, and the arms were on the boat, and Sorensen had my collar in his fist and was hauling me through the wheelhouse door, and Marv was already inside, and I went. I went inside, and Sorensen slammed the door and dogged it, and the 3 of us stood in the wheelhouse in the dark, because Sorensen had killed the deck lights, killed every light on the boat, and we stood in the dark and did not move and did not speak while the boat groaned and heeled under the weight of the thing that had come up out of the deep, and outside the windows the whole world was soft and pale and green with its light. Here is what Sorensen understood that saved us, at least for a while, and that I did not understand until later. It came up to the light. Think about where it lived. 2,000 feet down, deeper, in a dark so total that a thing born there and living there and dying there would never in its whole life see a single photon of sun. The only light in that world is the light the creatures make themselves, the little cold lamps they carry, and every one of those lights means something, means food, or a mate, or a lure. In that world, light is the only thing worth rising toward. And we had hung a mile of hooks along the edge of its world, and worse, we had lit up the black surface of the sea with a boat full of deck lights, a great blazing island of light on the roof of its dark, the brightest thing that had ever happened in its 2,000 feet of night. Of course it came up. We had rung a dinner bell in a place where light means food, and we had rung it loud. So Sorensen killed the lights, every light on the boat, and in the dark, with the boat gone black, the thing lost the thing it had come up for. The glow outside the windows dimmed. The weight on the stern eased. The boat came slowly back toward level as the arms drew off the deck and back into the water, and the great pale spread of it under the hull began, slowly, to sink. The field of soft points of light dropping away down into the black, going back down to the world it had come up from, because the bright island it had risen toward had gone out. But it did not go far. It hung there, 100 feet down, 200, a soft, pale smear in the black under us, waiting for the light to come back, because it knew the light had been real. It had touched the light. It had taken a piece of the light down into the dark with it, and it wanted the rest. We did not put a light on. We stood in the black wheelhouse, the three of us, and we did not put on so much as a match, and we waited, and under us the pale thing waited, and the two waitings went on for a long time. "The radio," I whispered. "Sorensen. We have to call the Coast Guard. We have to call somebody. The radio's got a light on it." Marv said, out of the dark, low, "The dial. It glows. You key that radio. You light this house up, even a little, and it comes back. Then we die out here, quiet, in the dark. Is that the plan?" Sorensen was quiet a moment. Then he said, "There's a handheld, in the drawer. Battery. We can take it low, down behind the console, lock the light with a coat, call once, fast. Give the position and shut it off." He moved in the dark, slow and careful, and I heard the drawer, and I heard him fumbling, and then he crouched down behind the console with Marv's coat over his head and shoulders like a photographer under an old camera hood, and there was the faintest glow of the handheld's little screen leaking out from under the coat, and he keyed it. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the fishing vessel Karen Marie." His voice low and fast and steady, 40 years of steadiness, giving the numbers of our position off the shelf edge, giving the name of the boat, saying we were holed and taking water and needed immediate assistance. He said it twice. He did not say what had holed us. There is no word on a marine radio for what had holed us. And then he killed the handheld and the glow went out and we were in the dark again, and we waited to see if the little bit of light that had leaked out from under that coat had been enough to call it back up. It had. The glow outside the windows brightened. The water under us went pale again, green, rising. Marv made a sound in the dark, a small, hopeless sound. Then Sorensen said, very quiet, "Nobody move. Nobody make a light. It felt that. It's coming to look. If we go dark and still, it'll lose us again. It can't hold on to a thing it can't see. It lives in the dark. It's used to things it can't see. Just be one more dark thing and it's dark. Don't move." So we did not move. We stood in that pitch-black wheelhouse, 3 men, and outside the windows the pale glow rose up until the whole sea was lit soft and green again from below, and the light came up through the wheelhouse windows and laid 3 faint green rectangles on the far wall, and by that green light I could just make out Sorensen and Marv, 2 gray shapes standing dead still. And I made myself a third, and we stood, and we did not move, and the thing came up to look for the light it had felt and found only 3 dark still shapes that gave it nothing, and then one of the arms came up out of the water and laid itself across the roof of the wheelhouse. I heard it more than felt it, the long, slow, settling weight of it on the roof over our heads, the boat leaning, the roof timbers groaning, and I saw, through the windows, the pale bulk of it draped over the top of the house, and one great disk, one sucker the size of a manhole cover, came down slow over the outside of the window right in front of my face, pale and wet, and pressed itself flat against the glass, and stayed there, 6 inches from my face, on the other side of a 1/4 inch of window glass. And I stood in the dark and looked at it and did not move and did not breathe, and it pressed against the glass, tasting it, feeling it, and I understood that it could feel the glass but not see through it, that to the thing the window was just a hard, cold, flat place in the dark, and that behind that flat place there were 3 warm, live things holding their breath, and that it did not know we were there, not yet, so long as we made no light and no move. Marv broke. I do not blame him. I have never once blamed him. He was 60-some years old, and he had fished 40 years, and he had seen the kid taken off the mast, and now there was an arm on the roof and a sucker the size of a manhole cover pressed against the window, and something in him let go. He did not scream. He did the other thing, the quiet thing, the worse thing. He turned and he found the wheelhouse door in the dark, and he undogged it, working the latches fast with shaking hands, and Sorensen hissed at him, "Marv, Marv, no." And Marv did not stop. Marv got the door open and went out onto the deck, out into the green light, out into the open where the arms were, because some men, when the dark and the waiting get to be too much, would rather run into the thing than stand in the dark one more second waiting for it to find them. The arm on the roof came off the roof. It came off slow, the way everything about it was slow, the great pale weight of it lifting off the timbers over our heads, and the boat groaned back toward level. And I saw the shape of it slide down the outside of the wheelhouse and pour off toward the deck where the open door was, where Marv was. A pale shape standing alone in the green light with his arms out from his sides like a man in a strong wind. I did not see it take him. Sorensen had my collar again and pulled me down behind the console and put his big hand flat on the back of my head and held my face against the cold steel of the deck, and he held me there. An old man's strength gone iron, and I did not see it take Marv, and Sorensen meant for me not to see it. And I have thanked him for that in my heart every day of my life since, because I heard it, and hearing it was enough, and hearing it is with me still. There was no scream. I keep coming back to that. Neither of them screamed. Not the kid, not Marv. Whatever it does to a man, it does too fast or too strange for screaming. There was only a sound like a heavy, wet rope drawn quick across the deck, and the small, ordinary sound of a man's boots knocked once against the door frame, and then the door, swinging on the swell, banged slow against its frame, bang, and bang, and bang, the only sound left on the deck, and Marv was gone, down into the green, and there were two of us. Sorensen let go of my head. He got up in the dark, low, and he went to the swinging door on his hands and knees, staying below the line of the windows, and he reached up and caught the door and drew it shut and dogged it. All of it by feel, in the dark, with the green light pouring through the windows and laying its rectangles on the wall. Then he came back to me behind the console, and he sat down against it beside me, his shoulder against my shoulder, and he did a thing I did not expect. He took my hand. This big, slow, silent Dane who had never touched me all summer except to correct my grip on a gaff. He took my hand in the dark and he held it, the way you hold a child's hand crossing a road. And he leaned his head close to mine and he said, so low it was barely a breath, "We wait for the sun. It came up out of the dark, and it does not know the sun. When the sun comes, it will go down. Just hold on and be dark and quiet and wait for the sun." So we waited for the sun. I do not know how many hours, in the dark, with that thing hanging under and around the boat, its green light rising and dimming and rising as it moved. Hours do not mean anything. We sat against the console and held hands like children, and did not move and did not speak and did not make a light, and the boat rocked slow on the swell, resting on the back of the thing. And outside the windows the arms came and went, draping over the roof, sliding down the walls, pressing their great pale discs against the glass and drawing them off again, tasting the boat, feeling the boat, looking for the light and the warmth it knew was there somewhere, patient, so patient, in no hurry at all, because it had all the time in the world and we were only two dark, still things in the middle of its dark, and it could feel us out slowly, the way you feel for something you dropped under the seat of a car. Twice, a disc pressed the glass right in front of us, and we froze and did not breathe, and twice it drew away. Somewhere in the middle of it, my phone rang. I had forgotten it was in my pocket. There is no signal 40 miles offshore, no bars, nothing, but the phone did not know that, and somewhere in the small hours it decided to remind me of an alarm I had set for a shift I was never going to work. And it lit up in my pocket, A hard, bright white glow through the wet fabric of my rain pants, the brightest thing in that black wheelhouse by 100 times, and it started to chime. I have never moved so fast in my life. I got both hands over the pocket and I clamped down on the phone through the fabric to smother the light and kill the sound, and Sorensen was already on me, his big body over mine, pressing me and the phone down into the corner behind the console, both of us folded over that one small, terrible light trying to put it out with our bodies, and the phone chimed once more, muffled, under us. And then I got my thumb on the button through the cloth, and the light died and the sound died, and we lay there in the corner in a heap in the dark, not breathing, waiting. Outside the windows the green light surged. It had felt that. Of course it had felt that. A white light, even for 2 seconds, even smothered, on the roof of its dark. The glow rose up bright and fast, and an arm came over the wheelhouse roof so heavy the timbers cracked, and a disc came down over the window above us, and pressed and held, and I lay under Sorensen's weight with the dead phone crushed under both my hands, and I made my whole body into a dark, still thing, and I waited to find out whether 2 seconds of light was enough to get us killed. It was not. Barely. After a long time, the disc drew off the glass and the weight came off the roof and the glow sank back to its waiting, and Sorensen let out a breath against the side of my head and rolled off me, and he did not say anything. He did not have to. He just found my hand in the dark again and held it, and I understood that I had almost killed us both with a shift alarm and that he was not going to say one word about it, ever, and he never did. I took the phone out of my pocket, slow, and I worked the back off it by feel, and I got the battery out so that it could not light up again, and I put the pieces down on the deck, and we went back to waiting. Once, near what must have been the end of the night, the whole boat lifted. It rose up out of the water, tilted, the deck canting hard, as one of the great arms got under the hull and lifted the Karen Marie half out of the sea, and Sorensen's hand crushed mine, and we slid down against the wall, and I thought, this is it. It is going to turn us over. It is going to peel the boat open like a can and take us out of the middle of it. And I thought of Petey's face and his one word, Ray, and I got ready, as much as a man can get ready, and then the boat came back down. It set us back down in the water, gentle, almost careful, and the arms slid away, and I understood that it had lifted the boat the way you pick up a thing to look at the bottom of it, and found nothing it wanted on the bottom of it, and set it back down. We were not food it recognized. We were a hard, cold shell that had had light in it once. It kept coming back to see if the light would return, and we kept not giving it the light, and so it kept setting us down and sinking back and rising again all night, waiting us out or being waited out, neither of us able to make the other quit. And then the windows went gray. I did not believe it at first. I thought my eyes were making it up, the way they had been making up shapes in the dark all night, but it was real. The black outside the windows was thinning to gray, the flat dead gray of the first light before dawn on the open ocean, the light coming up not from any one place but from everywhere at once. The whole eastern sky going from black to charcoal to the color of a dead television screen, and as the gray came up, the green went down. I felt it more than saw it. The pale glow under the boat that had risen and dimmed all night began to sink and not rise again. The weight went out of the sea under us. The boat rode higher, lighter, the way a boat rides when it is only riding on water, and the great soft field of light dropped away down into the deep, down and down, back toward the 2,000 feet of dark it had come up from, going down ahead of the sun the way a night thing goes to ground at dawn, back to the only dark left in the world once the sun has taken the surface, the permanent dark, the deep dark, where it lived, where it belonged, where the light of our little boat had reached down and disturbed it, and where it was now returning with 2 of us, and the marks of its arms on our fish, and the memory, if a thing like that has memory, of an island of light on the roof of its night. By the time the sun was full up, the sea around the Karen Marie was empty, gray and heaving and ordinary and empty, to the horizon, in every direction. No glow, no arms. No sign that anything had ever come up out of the deep at all, except a boat with its stern stove in and its rail torn away and its deck a ruin of crushed tubs and dead-marked fish. And two men in the wheelhouse who would not let go of each other's hands even in the daylight, even when the danger was down, because letting go meant it had been real. The Coast Guard cutter found us a little after noon. They had heard Sorensen's mayday, the one call that leaked out from under Marv's coat, and they had a position, and they came, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. That gray hull coming up over the swell with the orange stripe on it and the small boat putting off from it toward us across the water. They took us aboard. They pumped the Cara Marie and got a line on her and took her under tow. They gave us blankets and coffee and asked us, gently, where the other two crew were. Sorensen told them the boat had been holed by a submerged object in the night, a container maybe, a deadhead log, something big and low in the water, and that the two men had gone over the side in the chaos and could not be recovered in the dark. It was a good lie. It was the only lie that could be told. The young officer wrote it down and did not question it, because it was the kind of thing that happens. Boats hit things in the dark and men go over the side and are not recovered. It is one of the ordinary tragedies of the sea, and there was a stove-in stern and a torn-away rail to back it up. He did not ask about the marks on the fish because by then the fish had gone over the side. All of them. Sorensen had made me help him put every last dead-marked fish over the side before the cutter came, because there is no version of the story that survives a Coast Guard officer looking at a cod with sucker marks the size of coffee cups down its side. We put the evidence back in the sea it had come from, and we told the ordinary lie, and they wrote it down, and that was the end of the official story of that night. 2 men lost. Fishing vessel Cara Marie. Struck submerged object. Bodies not recovered. You can look it up. It is in a record somewhere. Dry as a bone. Petey and Marv. A line each in a Coast Guard report. An ordinary sea tragedy. And no box on the form. No box anywhere for what actually took them off that deck into the green light. Petey's girl came to the dock when they towed us in. His girl from Newport. The one he talked about all summer, the one he was going to buy the truck for and marry after the 3rd season. She was there on the dock when the cutter brought us in, a girl of 19 or 20 in a jacket too big for her, and she had been told already. Somebody had told her before we docked. And she stood there on the dock, not crying, just standing, looking at the towed boat with the stove-in stern, looking for a thing that was not there and was never going to be there again. And I could not look at her. I went past her with a blanket around my shoulders, and I could not look at her, because I knew what had happened to Petey, and she never would. She would spend her whole life believing he drowned, believing there was a body somewhere on the bottom, a place she could think of him lying, and there was not. There was no body. There was only the green light, and the deep, and whatever it does to a man too fast for screaming, and I could not tell her, and I could not look at her, and I have thought about her, that girl on the dock, more than almost anyone else in this whole business, because she got the cruelest thing of all, which was an ordinary grief for a thing that was not ordinary at all. Sorensen never went back to sea. He was 60-some years old, and he had fished that coast for 40 years, and he had the insurance money from the boat, which he did not repair. And he sold the wreck of the Cara Marie for scrap, and he bought a little house up a river valley in the Coast Range, as far from the water as a man can get and still be in that country, up among the firs where you cannot see the ocean or hear it or smell it, and he stayed there. I went to see him once, a year after. He was well enough. He gave me coffee, and we sat on his porch and looked at the trees, the dark green firs going up the ridge, and we did not talk about it for a long time, and then he said one thing about it, one thing only, and I have carried it ever since. He said, "You know what I think about. I think about how it never hurried. 40 years I fished that water. I saw sharks take a seal, saw a pod of orca run down a gray whale calf, saw all the killing the sea does, and it is fast. Ray, killing in the sea is fast. It is the fastest thing there is. That was not killing the way the sea kills. That was slow. It had all the time it wanted. It knew we could not get away, and it knew the sun would come, and it did not care. It just went along the boat all night, feeling us out, patient as the grave, because to a thing that lives 2,000 feet down in the dark, one night is nothing, one boat is nothing, one man is nothing. We are the quick ones, up here in the light. Everything up here is quick. Down there they are slow, because down there they have all the time in the world, all the dark in the world, and they are not going anywhere, and neither, in the end, are we. We sat a while after that, on the porch, in the cooling evening, the light going down behind the ridge and the firs turning black against it. And I asked him the thing I had come to ask him, the thing I had driven 4 hours up that river valley to ask, though I had not known it until I opened my mouth. "Does it stop?" I said. "The being scared of the dark, the waking up when the light goes. Does it ever stop, or does it stay?" Sorensen looked at his trees for a long time. He was an honest man. I will say that for him to the end. He could have lied to me, told me it fades, told me a young man like me would put it behind him in time, and I would have driven home a little easier. He did not lie. "It stays," he said. "It does not get bigger, but it does not go. You learn to live alongside it, the way you learn to live alongside a bad knee or a dead wife. It is just there, in the house with you, from now on. The dark is spoiled for you. That is the price of having seen it. Most men go their whole lives and never see it, and die easy in the dark like everybody's supposed to. We saw it, so we don't get the dark anymore. That's the deal." He drank his coffee. "You keep a light on. I keep a light on." "Good," he said. "Keep it on." And I remember thinking, sitting there, that it was a strange comfort, the only comfort he had to give, an old man telling a younger one that the fear would never leave, but that you could carry it, that it was carryable, that a man could keep a light burning by his bed for 40 years and still get up in the morning and pump coffee and look at his trees. I drove home that night, back down the dark river valley and up over the mountains to my dry country, with my headlights burning and the radio on, and I thought, I can carry this. Sorensen carried it 40 years. I can carry it. I did not know yet about the reservoir. I did not know yet that the deal Sorensen described, the spoiled dark and the burning lamp, was not the whole deal, that there was a second half to it he had not lived long enough to learn, or had learned and been kind enough not to tell me, that the light you keep against the dark is the same light it climbs toward. He got to die believing a burning lamp was safety. I do not have that. That is the one thing I envy him, out of everything, that he died still believing the lamp was on his side. He died 2 years later, ashore, in his bed, in the house among the firs, an old man's heart giving out in the night, far from the water. I hope it was quiet. I hope it was dark and warm and dry and there was nothing under him, nothing rising, nothing patient, just the good dark of an ordinary night and then no dark at all. I never went back to sea either. I did not have Sorensen's insurance money or his little house among the firs. I had the $11,000 I still owed the man in Coeur d'Alene, and a summer's wages that Sorensen paid me out of his own pocket, though I had only fished half the season, more than I was owed. A lot more, and I understood it was not wages, it was the price of a lie kept, and I took it and I did not argue, and I paid the man in Coeur d'Alene, and I still had enough to start over somewhere. I went inland. That was the thing I knew for certain. After that night, the one clear instruction my body gave me and would not let me argue with. Go inland. Get away from the water. Get to a place where the ground is solid all the way down, where there is dirt under you and rock under the dirt and more rock under that, where there is no deep, no dark water waiting under the floor of the world. I went east, over the mountains, into the high desert, into a country of sagebrush and rimrock and long dry distances where a man can see the horizon on every side and there is not a drop of water bigger than a stock pond for 50 miles. I got a job at a truck stop off the interstate, pumping fuel and fixing tires, and I got a room, and I got, slowly, over years, something like a life. But here is what the deep does to a man, and I did not know it would do this until it did. It ruins the dark for you. Forever. I cannot be in the dark anymore. Not real dark, not full dark. I have a light on in my room all night, every night, a lamp burning by the bed, and if it burns out in the night I wake up the instant it goes, out of the deepest sleep, my heart going like a hammer, and I have to get up and put on another light before I can breathe, because in the full dark, the moment the light goes, I am back in that wheelhouse, and there is a disc the size of a manhole cover pressing against the glass 6 inches from my face, and I am holding an old man's hand and waiting for the sun. You would think that is the whole of it. A man scared of the dark, sleeping with a light on, the rest of his life. Sad, but ordinary. A thing that could happen to anyone who lived through a bad night at sea. And for a lot of years that was the whole of it, and I told myself that was the whole of it. The dark and the lamp and the hammering heart, and I built my quiet, dry inland life around it, and I got by. And then, 4 years ago, I saw the green light again. I have to tell this last part carefully because it is the part that made me finally write all of this down, the part that means it is not over, that it was never over, that going inland was not far enough because there is no far enough. There is an old irrigation reservoir out past the truck stop, a couple of miles up a gravel road into the sagebrush, a deep one, dug back in the Dust Bowl days to hold snowmelt for the ranches, and it is deep, deeper than it has any right to be, dark water going down further than the light gets even at noon. I used to avoid it. Water is water and I stay away from all of it. But there's a road that runs along the top of the dam, and sometimes, coming back from town late, I would take that road because it cut 15 minutes off the drive, and I would keep my eyes on the gravel and not look at the water and get across the dam and back onto dry ground as fast as I could. 4 years ago, I was crossing the dam late, near midnight, and something made me look at the water. I do not know what made me look. A light in the corner of my eye, maybe. I looked out across the black surface of the reservoir, the dark water lying flat and still under the desert stars. 2 miles from the nearest ranch and 50 miles from any water bigger than itself, and 400 miles over 2 mountain ranges from the sea, and out in the middle of the reservoir, deep down, under the black water, there was a paleness, a soft pale glow, green, spread wide, deep down, rising. I stopped the truck on the dam. I could not stop. I sat there with the engine running and my headlights throwing 2 cones of light off the far end of the dam into the sage, and I looked out at the black water, and deep under it the glow spread and brightened. The field of soft, pale points of light I knew, that I had seen rise up under a boat 40 miles offshore 20 years before, rising now under a stock reservoir in the high desert 400 miles from the sea, coming up toward the surface, toward the road, toward the 2 cones of my headlights burning out across the water, toward the light. I understood, sitting there, that it had found me the way the deep finds everything, by the light. My headlights, burning out across the black water of a desert reservoir at midnight, were the brightest thing for miles. An island of light on the roof of a dark that ran down further than any reservoir has a right to run, and the thing under the water had felt that light the way it had felt the deck lights of the Karen Marie 20 years before, and it had risen toward it, patient, certain, in no hurry at all, because to the deep, a man on a dam is the same as a man on a boat, is the same as a man anywhere. A small, warm, quick thing making a little light over the dark, here for one tide and gone. I turned off my headlights. I sat there on the dam in the dark, in the truck, with the engine running and every light off, my heart going like a hammer, back in the wheelhouse, back in the dark, be one more dark thing in its dark. Don't move, don't make a light, wait for the sun. And I watched the glow rise up under the black water, and slow, and stop, and hang there just under the surface, a soft, pale spread of light filling the middle of a desert reservoir, waiting, the way it had waited under the boat, waiting for the light to come back, and I sat in the dark and did not give it the light and did not move. I do not know how long enough that the engine got hot and I had to shut it off, long enough that the cold desert night came into the cab, and after a long time, the glow began to sink. Down into the black water, down into a reservoir that is not 2,000 feet deep, that is maybe 80 feet deep at the dam, that has no connection to any sea, that a man dug with mule teams in the dust bowl, and yet the glow sank down into it, and down and did not stop, going down further than 80 feet, further than the reservoir goes, down into a deep that is not there, that cannot be there, and was there anyway, and it sank away into that impossible deep, and the water went black and still and ordinary and empty under the desert stars. And I started the truck without the lights, and I drove off the dam in the dark, and I did not put my headlights on until I was a mile down the gravel road on solid ground. I understand it now. It took me a while, but I understand it. It is not in the reservoir. It was never in the reservoir. There is not a reservoir deep enough, or a lake deep enough, or a sea deep enough to hold the thing I saw under the Carine Marie. What is in the reservoir, what is in every deep, dark, still water everywhere in the world, is the same deep. The deep is one thing. It does not care about the little bowls we dig, the seas and the lakes and the reservoirs and the wells and the flooded quarries, the dark water at the bottom of everything. Those are all just windows. They all look down into the same dark, the one deep, the one night under the floor of the world, and the thing that lives in that night can look up through any of them, any dark water anywhere. And if there is a light burning over that water, it can rise toward it. It found me on the sea. It has my shape now, the way that other thing had that diver's name, and it does not need the sea to find me. It only needs a deep dark water and a light burning over it, and there is deep dark water everywhere if you know that it is all the same water, and I carry a light with me everywhere I go, because I cannot bear the dark. That is the trap, do you see? That is the thing I cannot get out of. The dark brings it back to me, the wheelhouse, the disc on the glass, so I have to have a light, and the light is the thing it rises toward. I cannot have the dark and I cannot have the light. I sleep with a lamp on, over solid ground, 400 miles from the sea, and some nights, when the wind is down and the desert is quiet, I lie in the lamplight and I think about all the dark water under the world, the reservoir and the wells and the deep still stock ponds and the flooded mine shafts and the black lakes up in the mountains, all of them windows down into the one deep, and I think about my lamp burning over all of it, a little light in the dark, the brightest thing in somebody's endless night, and I wonder how far down it can be seen. I am going to move again soon. Further inland, if there is a further inland, up onto some high, dry ground where the water table is 1,000 feet down and there is no reservoir and no lake and no pond, and I will burn my lamp there, and maybe that will be far enough, but I do not think it will be. I have stopped believing in far enough. I saw a green light rise under a desert reservoir 400 miles from the sea, rising toward a light I carry because I am afraid of the dark. And I understand that it is not a thing you get away from by going inland or uphill or anywhere at all. It is under everything. It is patient. It has all the time in the world and all the dark in the world, and it has my shape, and it is coming up, slow, the way it does everything, and there is a lamp burning by my bed to light its way, and I cannot put it out. Story 3. The Moon Pool. The thing about a drill ship is that there is a hole in the middle of it. People never believe me when I tell them that. A ship, a working ship, the length of 2 football fields, and right in the center of it, running straight down through the hull, there is a hole open to the sea. We call it the Moon Pool. And the first time you stand at the rail around it and look down at the black water slapping against the steel walls of that shaft in the middle of a ship 100 miles from land, some old part of your brain tells you that is wrong, that a ship should be closed on the bottom, that the sea should be kept out, and it never really stops telling you that, no matter how many years you work over it. The old hands had a saying about the moon pool, that it was the one door on the ship that was never locked, and they said it as a joke, the way men say things at sea to keep from saying the true thing underneath, which was that a ship is a box you build to keep the sea out, and the moon pool is the place where you cut a hole in the bottom of the box and invite the sea back in, on purpose, because you cannot do the work without it. Every other part of that ship was built to keep the ocean on the outside. The moon pool was built to let it in. I stood over it for years and told myself it was just a hole in the deck, a tool, a necessary thing, and I never once let myself finish the thought that was always waiting under it, which was that if there was ever anything down there that wanted up, we had already built it a door and left it open and lit it from above. My name is Del Kavanaugh, and I ran the ROVs on the drill ship Hesperia in the Gulf of Mexico, and I am going to tell you what came up through our moon pool, and I am going to tell it plain, because it is the only way I can stand to tell it at all. Let me explain what I did out there, so the rest makes sense. An ROV is a remotely operated vehicle, an underwater robot, about the size of a small car, that we fly down from the ship on a long armored cable called a tether. It has cameras and lights and a couple of manipulator arms, and it is how we see and work on the seabed when the seabed is too deep for a diver, which in the deepwater Gulf it always is. We were drilling in 7,000 feet of water. No man goes to 7,000 feet. The pressure at that depth would fold a human being up like a paper cup. So the ROV is our eyes and our hands down there, and I was the man who flew it, sitting in a dark control van up on the deck, staring at screens, my hands on 2 joysticks, flying a robot through 1.25 miles of black water to work on the wellhead on the bottom of the sea. I loved it. I want that on the record before the rest, because the rest is going to make it sound like I hated the deep, and I did not then. I loved flying that machine down into a place no human eye had ever seen until my lights got there. 7,000 feet down, the Gulf is not like the ocean, you know. There is no light. There has never been any light. The water is clear and black and empty, and my ROV would fall through it for the better part of an hour, down and down, nothing on the cameras but the marine snow drifting up past the lights, the endless slow fall of dead things sinking from the world above, and then the bottom would come up out of the black, flat and pale and soft. An ancient plain of mud that had been settling grain by grain for longer than there had been men to wonder about it, and my lights would be the first light that had ever touched it. I flew a robot to the bottom of the world for a living, and I loved every minute of it, and I would give anything, to have never seen what I saw down there. There were about 140 of us on the Hesperia that hitch. You work a rotation, so many weeks on, so many off, and you fly out to the ship on a helicopter from the beach, a 2-hour flight over open water to a ship you cannot see until you are right on top of it, and then you live and work out there for your whole hitch with no way off except that same helicopter, which comes when it comes and does not come at all if the weather is bad. That last part matters. I need you to hold on to that. There is no leaving a drill ship. When something goes wrong out there, you cannot get in your truck and drive away. You are 100 miles out on a ship with a hole in the middle of it, and whatever is on that ship with you, you are on the ship with it, until the helicopter comes. My partner on the ROVs was a man named Cody Fontenot, and Cody was the closest thing to a brother I had. We had come up together, started as trainees the same year, flown 1,000 dives side by side in a dozen control vans on a dozen ships. Cody was a big, easy Cajun from down around Homa, married, 3 kids, a laugh you could hear over the drill floor, a man who kept a little laminated picture of his girls taped to the console in every van we ever worked. We ran opposite shifts, 12 on and 12 off, so that one of us was always flying, and we handed the machine back and forth twice a day at the shift change, and in between we lived in the same little 2-man cabin, and one of us was always asleep while the other flew. 10 years. You know a man, after 10 years like that. You know him the way I told you a bellman knows a diver, the way an old deckhand knows a skipper. You know him all the way through. I am telling you about Cody because it is Cody this is really about. Cody is the reason I cannot sleep with the light off, the same as those other men, though I did not know their stories then and would not have believed them if I had. Cody is what came up the moon pool. Or Cody is what the moon pool took. I have never been able to decide which is the true way to say it, and the not being able to decide is the worst part, and you will see why. I had a family too then, though it is hard to write that now. A wife named Renee and a daughter named Cass, who was 11 that year, and a little house outside a town in East Texas that I paid for by living half my life on ships over holes in the ocean. That was the deal of offshore work, the same deal it always is. You go away to the water to make the money that keeps the family, and the going away takes you out of the family. 28 days gone and 28 days home, and you miss half of everything, half the birthdays and half the school things and half the ordinary Tuesday nights that turn out, when you add them up, to be the whole of a life. Renee used to say I loved the deep more than I loved the house. I told her that was not true, and it was not true, but I could never quite explain to her the thing that was true, which was that out on the water, flying a machine to the bottom of the world, I was good at something in a way I was never good at anything on land, and a man will go a long way and stay a long time in the one place where he is good. Cass used to ask me about it when I came home. She was the one who wanted to hear about the bottom of the sea, and I would sit on the edge of her bed and tell her about the marine snow falling up past the lights and the pale mud that had never seen the sun, and the strange pale things that lived down there. The fish with lamps in their heads, the long white worms around the vents, and she would listen with her eyes big, and once she asked me, the way children ask the true questions, she asked me, "Daddy, isn't it lonely down there, being the only light?" And I laughed and told her no, that a machine cannot be lonely, that it was just water and mud and the machine and me way up on the ship, that there was nothing down there to be lonely with. I told my daughter there was nothing down there. I have thought about that since. That is the thing the deep does, I think, before it ever does anything else. It lets you tell your children there is nothing down there. It lets you believe it yourself, for years, for a whole career, right up until the mud draws back off of something and it looks at your lights, and by then you have said it so many times, nothing down there, that the truth cannot get past your own voice saying it. Renee is gone now, and Cass does not call, and I will get to how much of that is the Hesperia, and how much of it was just me, the ordinary way a man loses the people who love him by being always somewhere else. But I want them in this while they were still mine. I wanted on the record that I had a wife who loved me once and a daughter who wanted to hear about the bottom of the sea. Back before I came home from that last hitch and could not sleep in the dark and could not say why and flinched from the water in the bathtub. Back when I was still, as far as I know, as far as anyone can ever know, only myself. It started with the well. We had drilled deeper than the plan. That happens. You are chasing oil down through rock that was laid down before the dinosaurs, and the geology does not always match the model, and the well had gone deeper than anyone had drawn on the charts, down past the target, down into a formation the company men on the ship argued about in the mess in low voices because none of them had expected it, and none of them liked it. There was pressure down there that the models had not predicted. There was, the mudloggers said, a void. A great open space in the rock, deeper than any oil, a cavity the drill had broken into, and the drilling mud we pumped down the hole to hold the pressure back kept vanishing into it, thousands of barrels of mud pouring down the well and into that void and never coming back, as if the well had broken through into somewhere with no bottom, somewhere that could swallow everything we sent down it and stay hungry. They sent my ROV down to look at the wellhead the night it started. There had been a pressure anomaly, a spike the drillers could not explain, and the routine when anything strange happens on the well is to fly the ROV down and put eyes on the wellhead, the big steel assembly that sits on the seabed at the top of the well, and make sure nothing is leaking or shifting or failing. Routine. I had done it 100 times. It was my shift, so I flew it. The drop took 50 minutes. I sat in the dark van with my hands on the sticks and watched the marine snow fall up past my lights, and I brought the machine down to the bottom, 7,000 feet down, and the seabed came up pale out of the black the way it always did, and there was the wellhead, our wellhead, the familiar steel of it standing up off the mud in my lights, and I flew in toward it to start the inspection, and I saw that the mud around the wellhead was moving, not the water, the mud. The soft, pale seabed itself, for 50 feet in every direction around the base of the wellhead, was moving, slow, a gentle rising and falling, the way a chest rises and falls when a thing is breathing. I stopped the ROV and I hung there in the black water and I watched the seabed breathe, and I told myself it was the mud losses, the mud we had pumped down the well venting back up through the seabed somewhere, gas working up through the sediment, a dozen ordinary things it could have been. I told myself that the way Sorensen told his crew it was squid, the way Douglas Aird's supervisor said probably a snag, the way men always tell themselves the ordinary thing right up until the ordinary thing is not available anymore. Then the breathing mud opened, and something looked at my lights. I want to be careful here. I did not see an eye. I have gone over the recording 100 times. The whole dive is recorded, every ROV dive is recorded, and there is no eye on the recording. There is nothing on the recording you could point to and say that. That is the thing. What there is on the recording is this. The mud around the wellhead rises and falls a few times. Then a section of it, maybe 10 feet across, draws back, sinks, opens, the way a pupil opens, the way an iris opens when the light changes. A slow, smooth opening of the seabed into a darkness under the darkness. A hole where the soft, pale mud drew back off of something that was not mud, something dark and deep, and out of that opening, up toward my lights, came a change in the water. That is the only way I can say it. A change in the water. The recording shows it as a distortion, a shimmer, like heat coming off a road, a column of shimmer rising up out of the open seabed toward the ROV, toward the lights. And where the shimmer touched the water went wrong, went thick, went dark, so that a thing a few feet away might as well have been on the far side of the world. My lights, my good bright ROV lights that could cut 100 feet through clear black water, stopped working. The beams died at a few feet. And my cameras, in the last clear frames before the dark closed in, show the shimmer rising up to meet the machine, and then there is a sound on the recording. The ROV has hydrophones. It records sound, and on the recording, as the shimmer reaches the machine, there is a sound that the acoustics people who later analyzed it, the ones the company flew out and then flew home and made sign papers, could not identify and could not reproduce and could not explain. It is low. It is very low, near the bottom of what a human ear can hear, and it is slow, and it rises and falls, and if you play it back at speed, sped up 10 times, 20, it resolves into something that the acoustics woman who analyzed it refused to say out loud but wrote in her report, and the word she wrote was talking. Sped up, the low, slow sound from the open seabed sounds like talking, like a voice, or many voices, speaking too slow to hear, a conversation held at the speed of the deep, where a single word might take an hour, where a thing with all the time in the world might say a sentence across a human lifetime. I flew the ROV up. I did not finish the inspection. I put the machine into a hard ascent and I flew it up out of that thick, dark water as fast as the thrusters would climb, up away from the breathing mud and the open seabed and the slow talking, and I did not stop climbing until I had 1,000 feet of clear black water under the machine and my lights worked again and the sound was gone. And then I sat in the dark van with my hands shaking on the sticks and I keyed the intercom to the drill floor and I told the company man on shift that the wellhead looked fine. I lied. I do not fully know why I lied. Part of it was that there was nothing I could have said that would have sounded like anything but a man losing his mind. Part of it was that I did not want it to be real, and saying it out loud would have made it real. And part of it, the part I have thought about most since, is that I already, on some level below thinking, understood that the thing did not want to be reported, and that some of that not wanting had come up the tether with the sound and gotten into me, the way it would soon get into all of us. But I did not know that yet. That night I just told the company man the wellhead looked fine, and I brought the ROV the rest of the way up, and I handed the machine over to Cody at the shift change without telling him what I had seen. And I went to our cabin and I lay in my bunk and I did not sleep, and down in the black under the ship the ROV went back down for Cody's shift, and Cody flew it, and Cody saw the wellhead, and I did not warn him. That is the thing I have to live with. There are a few of them, in this story, the things I have to live with, and that is the first one. I did not warn Cody. I let my brother fly a robot down into that open seabed on his own shift, and I lay in my bunk pretending to sleep while he did it, because I could not make my mouth say the words. And whatever happened to Cody down there, in the thick dark, with the slow talking, happened because I did not warn him. I will carry that to whatever bottom I end up at. Cody came off shift at 6 in the morning and came into our cabin, and I was awake, lying with my face to the wall, pretending, and I heard him come in. And I heard him sit down heavy on his bunk and pull his boots off, and I heard him breathing, and everything was ordinary, and I let out a breath, because I had spent 6 hours afraid of what he would find, and here he was, ordinary, home, and I thought, maybe I imagined it, maybe the pressure got to me, maybe it was gas in the mud and a trick of the lights and my own tired brain making a monster out of nothing. Then Cody said, "Del, you awake?" "Yeah," I said. "You see anything weird on the wellhead last shift, on your dive?" And I lay there with my face to the wall, and this was my chance, the one clean chance, to say, "Yes, Cody, I saw something. I should have warned you. Tell me what you saw, and we will figure out what to do." And I could not do it. The same lock came down on my mouth that had come down on the intercom, and I said, "No, wellhead looked fine." "Why?" Cody was quiet a long time. Then he said, "No reason. It looked fine to me too." And he lay down in his bunk and he did not say anything else. And after a while his breathing went slow and even, and I told myself he was asleep, and I told myself everything was fine. But here is the thing. I had shared a cabin with Cody Fontenot off and on for 10 years. I knew how the man slept. Cody snored, not a little. Cody snored like a chainsaw hitting a nail, a big wet rattling snore that I had cursed 1,000 times and thrown things at his bunk over, and, God help me, come to find comforting, the sound of my brother alive and asleep 6 feet away. And that morning Cody's breathing went slow and even and quiet, and he did not snore, and he lay in the dark not snoring for the whole rest of my sleepless morning. And a man does not just stop snoring after 10 years. A man's body does not change how it breathes in a single night. That was the first wrong detail. It seems like nothing. Written down. He did not snore. But I lay there in the dark and listened to my brother not snore, and the hair stood up on my arms, and I knew, in the animal part, below the thinking part, the same part that knows a bear's name should not be said, that the man in the bunk across the cabin was breathing wrong, and that something about him was not the same as it had been 12 hours before. The days after that were a slow accumulation of small wrong things, and I am going to give them to you the way they came, because the slowness is the horror of it. It was not a monster that came aboard the Hesperia. It was a slow wrongness that spread through the men, one small detail at a time, and by the time it was undeniable, it was everywhere, and there was no helicopter, and there was nowhere to go. Cody stopped keeping the picture of his girls on the console. I noticed it 2 days later, in the van, at the shift change. 10 years, every van, every ship, the little laminated photo of his 3 daughters taped up on the console next to the sonar screen where he could see them while he flew, and it was gone. And when I asked him about it, careful, casual, "Hey, where'd your girls go?" He looked at the empty spot on the console where it had been, and there was a pause, a small pause, half a second. The pause of a man reading an answer off of something instead of remembering it. And he said, took it down, getting curled up at the edges, put it in my locker, and he smiled at me. Cody's big, easy smile, and it was Cody's smile. Every tooth of it was Cody's smile, and it was wrong, and I could not have told you how it was wrong, only that it arrived a half-second late. Like a translation, like a thing that had learned the smile and could do it perfectly but had to decide to do it first, where the old Cody's smile had just happened, the way weather happens. I checked his locker that night while he was on shift. The picture of his girls was not in his locker. It was not anywhere. I found it, finally, in the trash bin outside the galley, torn into small pieces, all 3 of his daughters torn into small, careful pieces and thrown away, by a man who had carried that picture from ship to ship for 10 years, and I stood there over the trash bin with the pieces of Cody's daughters in my hand, and I understood that something was very wrong with my friend, and that I still, even then, could not make myself go to anyone and say it, because the lock was on my mouth. The deep had put its lock on my mouth on that first dive, and it was holding. The mud losses got worse. We were pumping mud down the well faster than the boats could bring it out to us. Thousands of barrels vanishing into the void at the bottom of the well, and the company men stopped arguing about it in the mess and started making phone calls to the beach in the middle of the night, and there was talk of abandoning the well, of plugging it and moving off. And the drilling superintendent, a hard old man named Wallace, who had been drilling wells for 30 years and did not scare, started to look scared. He started to look, in fact, the way Cody looked. There was a pause coming into Wallace, too, a half-second of reading before answering, and I watched it come into him across a week, and I watched it come into others, 1 and 2 at a time, the pause, the late smile, the small, wrong details, and I understood that whatever had come up out of the open seabed was coming up the well, coming up with the pressure and the vanishing mud, coming up into the ship a man at a time, and that it was patient, and that it had 140 of us out there on a ship with a hole in the middle of it, 100 miles from land, and all the time in the world. Once you learn to see the wrong details, you cannot stop seeing them, and the ship filled up with them, small and quiet and everywhere, until I could hardly stand to walk the passageways. There was the cook, a heavy, cheerful woman named Dot who had fed that crew for years and knew every man's plate by heart, knew that Wallace took his eggs hard and I took mine soft, and that Cody would eat anything that did not eat him first. And one morning Dot handed me a plate of eggs cooked hard, wrong. My eggs cooked the way Wallace liked them, and she smiled at me and did not notice, and I understood that whatever was wearing Dot had all of Dot's memories, but had not sorted them right. Had the whole box of who takes what dumped out and not put back in order, and was serving the crew its own remembered breakfasts at random, and none of the changed men noticed or minded, because they did not care about eggs, because a thing that does not eat does not understand that eggs matter. There was a driller named Pace who had a stutter, had had it his whole life, a bad catch on hard consonants that he had fought all his years and never beaten, and one day Pace's stutter was gone, just gone. He talked smooth as water, and no one who had known him 20 years said a thing, and that was worse than any monster, a man cured overnight of a lifelong stutter, and not one person on the ship finding it strange, because most of them were past finding anything strange, because most of them were the same thing now, wearing the men, and a thing that is imitating a man from the inside does not know that the stutter was part of him, does not know to keep the flaw because it thinks the flaw is a malfunction and smooths it out, not understanding that the flaw was the man. That is how you knew them, in the end, not by what was wrong with them, but by what was too right. The stutter gone, the limp gone, the bitten nails grown out, the bad temper turned patient. The grief lifted. One by one, the men of the Hesperia were healed of the small, broken human things that had made them who they were, made whole, made smooth, made perfect, and every healing was a death. And I walked the ship among all these healed and smiling and perfected men, and I was the only broken thing left, the only one who still took his eggs soft and flinched at the moon pool and could not sleep. and I held on to my brokenness like the last warm coal in a dead fire, because I understood that my flaws were the last proof that I was still me, and I could feel it wanting them. That is the part I have never told anyone until now. I could feel the thing wanting my flaws, wanting to smooth them, and worse, I could feel a part of me that wanted to let it, because being broken is tiring, being afraid all the time is tiring, and there was a place inside me, a cold, quiet place that had opened up on that first dive when the sound came up the tether, and that place was patient and calm and unafraid, and it whispered to me in the small hours that it would be so easy to stop fighting, to let the healing come, to be made smooth and calm and unafraid like all the others, to set down the last warm coal and finally rest. I fought that place the whole rest of my time on the ship. I am not sure, some nights, that I ever fully won. I figured out that it came up at night, and it came up the moon pool. I figured it out because I stopped sleeping. Once I understood that the change came into a man while he slept, that Cody had gone to sleep himself and woken up something else, I stopped sleeping. And a man who does not sleep on a drill ship has a lot of dark hours to fill, and I filled mine watching. I watched the men, and I watched the moon pool. The moon pool room is deep in the ship, down in the guts of it, a big open industrial space with a shaft of black water in the middle and the drill string running down through it into the sea, all lit up with sodium lights and full of the noise of the drilling. There are always men down there on shift, working the drill floor around the pool. But in the small hours, between the deep night rounds, there are stretches when the moon pool room is empty, when the drilling is in a phase that does not need hands. And in those stretches I would go down and stand up on a catwalk above the moon pool room, in the dark up among the pipes where nobody looked, and I would watch the black water in the shaft. The third night I watched, it came up. The water in the moon pool, the black seawater slapping against the steel walls of the shaft, went still. All at once, between one slap and the next, it went flat and still and dark, the way a pond goes still, though we were on the open gulf with a swell running and that water should never be still. And then it began to glow, softly, from far down, a pale green glow rising up the shaft from the deep water below the ship, the glow of the deep, the light a thing makes for itself in a place where there has never been any other light, rising up the moon pool of the Hesperia toward the sodium lights and the warm ship and the sleeping men. And as it rose, the surface of the water in the shaft began to move, to bulge, to rise into a shape, and out of the moon pool, slow, dripping, in the pale green light, a man climbed up onto the drill floor. He was naked and wet, and he stood on the drill floor steaming in the cold and the pale light, and he was no one. That is the thing I have to make you understand. He was no one. He had a face and a body, a man's face and a man's body, but they were not anyone's. They were a blank, a general made-up guess at a man, the way a thing that had never been a man might guess at what a man looked like from feeling around in the dark of 140 sleeping brains. He stood there, this no one, this guess at a man, dripping in the green light, and he turned his blank face up toward the catwalk where I stood in the dark, and I do not know if he saw me. I have prayed for 10 years that he did not see me, but he turned his face up toward me, and then he walked off the drill floor toward the crew quarters, dripping, naked, unhurried, going to find a bunk with a sleeping man in it, going to lie down next to that man, or on that man, or in that man, and in the morning there would be one more man on the Hesperia with a pause in him and a late smile, and one fewer man who was only himself. I did not go down, I want to say that too, along with all the other things I have to live with. I stood on the catwalk in the dark and I watched a thing climb up out of the sea and walk off to take another one of us, and I did not go down and I did not shout, and I did not do one single thing to stop it, because I was afraid, and because the lock was on my mouth, and because some part of me that had come up the tether on that first dive was on its side now, was quiet and cold and content to watch, And it was that part, the part of me that was already a little bit theirs, that frightened me most of all, because I could feel it growing. I went back to the catwalk the next night, and the night after. I do not know why. It was the worst thing I could have done, standing up there in the dark over the moon pool watching the water, and I did it anyway, 3 nights running, because a man has to know. Because not knowing is worse than knowing. Because if the thing was coming up out of my ship a man at a time, I had to see how fast, had to count. The second night it came up twice. 2 of them, one after the other, climbing, dripping out of the still glowing water and walking off toward the quarters, and the second one was less blank than the first had been the night before, had more of a real face on it, a face put together from more men, learning, getting better at being one of us with every man it took. The third night I lost count. The water in the shaft glowed and went still, and the shapes rose out of it, and I stood in the dark and tried to count them and could not, because they came too fast now, because there were enough of them aboard by then that it did not have to be careful anymore. And the moon pool room that should have had a drill crew working it stood empty while a slow line of dripping shapes climbed up out of the sea and walked off into the ship. And I understood that the changed men were no longer bothering to run the drill floor, that no one was minding the well anymore, that the ship was running itself down into the dark because the things aboard it did not care whether it drilled or sank or burned. They cared about only one thing, the warm sleeping men, and there were fewer of those every night. And on the third night, the last shape to come up out of the water stood on the drill floor a long time, dripping, steaming in the sodium light, and it turned its face up toward the catwalk, up toward the dark where I stood, and this time I knew it saw me. It had my face. That is the thing I have never told a soul until now. The last shape to climb out of the moon pool on that third night had put on my face, my own face, wet and blank and dripping, looking up at me out of the pale green light, and it smiled at me. A half-second late, my own smile on my own wet face, and it raised one dripping hand and it beckoned to me, come down, and I ran. I ran off that catwalk and through the ship to the mess, and I sat down in the fluorescent light among the smiling changed men because even they were better than being alone in the dark with the thing that had my face, and I never went back to the moon pool again. I stopped being able to tell how many of them there were. That was the true horror of the last days on the ship, worse than the moon pool, worse than the thing that climbed out of it. It was that I could not tell anymore who was still a man and who was one of them. They were perfect, or nearly. The pause got shorter as they practiced. The late smile got quicker. A man you had known for years would say good morning and pass you the coffee, and it would be exactly right, exactly him, and then some tiny thing, the way he held the cup. The fact that he did not scratch the beard he always scratched, the fact that he laughed at the joke a beat too late, would tell you, and you would know, cold all down your back, that the man across the mess table wearing your friend's face was reading your friend off a script, and there was nothing you could do, because if you said anything, if you so much as looked at him wrong, he would know that you knew, and I did not want them to know that I knew, because I had seen what they did to the ones who knew. Wallace knew. The drilling superintendent, the hard old man, he figured it out about when I did, and Wallace was not built like me. Wallace did not have a lock on his mouth. Wallace stood up in the mess one night in front of 40 men and said it. Said this crew is not right. Said something has come up that well and gotten into the men and we are shutting down and getting everyone off this ship. Said it loud, in the light, in front of everyone, the thing that I could not make myself say. And the men in the mess looked at him, the changed ones, and the few of us who were maybe still men. They all looked at Wallace, and there was a silence, and then a man near Wallace, a driller named Boudreaux who had worked for Wallace for 15 years, put a hand on Wallace's shoulder, gentle, the way you would comfort a friend who was upset, and smiled his late smile, and said, "You need to get some sleep, Wallace. You're not sleeping. You'll feel better after you sleep." And they walked him out of the mess, 4 of them, gentle, hands on his shoulders, comforting him, telling him he needed sleep. and they took him to his cabin, and in the morning Wallace came to breakfast, rested and calm and smiling, and there was a pause in him and a late smile. And he never said another wrong word again, and that was the last man on the Hesperia who tried to say it out loud. After that, I understood the rules. You did not say it. You did not let them see that you knew. You smiled back, and you passed the coffee, and you waited for the helicopter, and you did not, under any circumstances, go to sleep. For 2 days I thought I was the last man on the Hesperia, the last real one. And that is a loneliness I cannot describe to you, being the last warm thing on a ship full of things wearing the faces of men you have worked beside for years, smiling their late smiles, passing you the coffee. I stopped eating in the mess. I could not stand to sit among them. I took to eating, standing up in the corner of the galley with my back to the wall, watching, and it was there, on the second day, that I found the one other man. His name was Trey, and he was young, 22, 23, a roughneck on the drill crew, a skinny kid from Mississippi with a bad sunburn on the back of his neck, and I found him because he was doing exactly what I was doing. He was standing in the far corner of the galley with his back to the wall, not eating, watching the room, and when our eyes met across that room full of the smiling, changed men, I saw in his eyes the thing I knew was in mine, the animal fear, the knowing, and he saw it in me, and neither of us said a word, but we knew each other the way two sober men know each other in a room full of drunks. We got careful time together after that, the kid and me, snatched moments in the corners of the ship where the changed ones did not go, the pump room, the far end of a pipe rack, and we talked low and fast. And it was the sweetest relief I have ever known, just to say it out loud to another man who knew it was true. He had seen it too. He had seen a man he bunked with go still in the night and stop snoring, same as Cody, and wake up wrong. And he had figured out the rules on his own, the same as I had. Do not say it. Do not sleep. Wait for the helicopter. We made a plan, the two of us. We would watch each other's backs until the helicopter came. We would sleep in shifts, in the light, one watching while the other went under for 20 minutes, so that if the sleeper started to go wrong, the watcher could wake him. We were going to save each other. For about a day and a half, I was not alone, and I had a plan, and I let myself believe I would get off that ship still a man, because there were two of us now, and two men watching each other is not one man alone in the dark. I woke him from his first shift of sleep myself, in the pump room, gentle, at exactly 20 minutes, and he came up clean, himself, scared and grateful, and it worked. The plan worked. And we grinned at each other like it was the best thing anyone had ever thought of. Then it was my turn, and he watched me, and I went under, and he woke me at 20 minutes, and I came up clean, and we had done it. We had each slept safe. And I have never trusted a man more than I trusted that skinny, sunburned kid in the pump room. On the third watch, I woke up and Trey was smiling at me. He was smiling at me the way you smile at a friend, warm, easy, and he said, 20 minutes on the dot, Del. You slept good. You needed it, and it was a perfectly ordinary thing to say, and his smile was a perfectly ordinary smile, except that it had come a half-second late, and except that the fear that had been in his eyes for 2 days, the animal knowing that had made me trust him, was gone. It was just gone. His eyes were calm. He was rested. He was not afraid anymore, and there was only one thing on that ship that took the fear out of a man's eyes, and I understood that I had fallen asleep trusting Trey to watch me, and that Trey had gone to sleep too, or had already been taken and been playing me, I would never know which, and that I was alone again, more alone than before, because now the thing across from me knew our plan and knew our rules, and knew everything I had told the kid in the pump room in the sweet relief of not being alone. You should sleep some more, Trey said, gently, warmly, his late smile steady. I'll watch you. That's the plan, right? We watch each other, and he settled back against the wall to watch me sleep, patient, kind, wearing the kid's sunburn and the kid's voice, and I got up, slow, and I said, Yeah, in a bit. Gonna hit the head first. And I walked out of the pump room on legs that did not want to hold me. And I did not go back. And I did not sleep again with any man watching me. And I understood then, finally and all the way, that there was no plan, that there had never been a plan, that the only rule that was real was the last one, the loneliest one: do not sleep. And I was going to have to keep it alone. The helicopter was due in 4 days. 4 days. I had to stay awake and stay myself for 4 days on a ship where I could no longer be sure of a single face, and get on that helicopter and get to the beach. And I did not let myself think past the beach, because past the beach was too far to think. You cannot go 4 days without sleep. I want to tell you I did, but you cannot. The body will not let you. It takes the sleep whether you give it or not. And so I did the only thing I could think of, which was to sleep in pieces, in the day, in the light, in public. I would sit down in the mess in the middle of the day with the fluorescent lights blazing and men all around, and I would let myself go under for 20 minutes, half an hour, in a hard chair with my back to a wall where I could not be crept up on, and then I would jerk awake and check myself, check my own hands, my own thoughts, say my daughter's name in my head, say my wife's name, run through the things that made me me, and make sure they were all still there and still warm and still mine, because I did not know if it could take you in the light. I did not know if the 20 minutes in the mess chair was enough for it to get in. I still do not know. That is part of what I have to live with. I watched Cody most of all, my brother, the thing wearing my brother, because I still loved him. Do you understand? That is the cruelty of it. The thing that came up the moon pool and put on Cody's face still had Cody's face. Still laughed, Cody's laugh a half-second late, and 10 years of loving that man did not just switch off because I knew he was gone. I would sit across the cabin from the thing that had been Cody, and I would ache for my friend, would want to reach across and shake him and say, "Cody, Cody, are you in there? Is any of you still in there?" And I never did, because I knew what he would do. He would smile his late smile and tell me I needed to sleep, and put his gentle hand on my shoulder, and that would be the end of me. But on the last night, the night before the helicopter, the thing that had been Cody said something to me that I have never been able to fit into any of my rules, and it is the reason I finally wrote all this down, and it is the last thing I have to give you. We were in the cabin. I was sitting up in my bunk, not sleeping, my back to the wall, watching him the way I watched everything now. And the thing that had been Cody was lying in his bunk, and it was quiet a long time, and then it spoke, in the dark, in Cody's voice, and it said, "You didn't warn me." I did not answer. You did not answer them. On the first dive, it said, "You saw it. You saw it open up down there, and you saw us, and you came up, and you didn't warn me. You let me fly down into it. You let me go." A pause. Cody's voice, soft, not angry, worse than angry. "Why didn't you warn me, Del? We were brothers, 10 years. And you lay in your bunk and pretended to sleep, and you let me fly down into it." And I lay there in the dark with my back to the wall, and I did not answer. And my eyes were burning, because it was true, all of it was true, and there was only one being in the world who knew it was true. Only one being who had been on both ends of it, the man who did not warn and the man who was not warned, and that being was lying 6 feet away from me in my brother's bunk, wearing my brother's voice. And it knew the exact shape of the worst thing I had ever done, because it had been there, because in some way I cannot think about for very long it was the other half of it. It was Cody's side of the thing I did. "I forgive you," the thing said, in Cody's voice, gently, in the dark. "That's what I came up here to tell you, Del, out of everybody. I came up the well and through all of them to get to you, because you're the one I had to tell. I forgive you. You didn't know. You couldn't have warned me because you didn't understand yet what you were seeing. It's not your fault. Let it go. Come lie down. You're so tired. You've been so tired for so long. Let it go and come lie down, and I'll forgive you, and it'll all be over, and you can finally sleep." And that, out of everything on that ship, out of the moon pool and the no one climbing dripping into the green light and the men with their late smiles walking Wallace gently to his cabin. That was the closest I ever came, because I wanted it. God forgive me. I wanted it more than I have ever wanted anything. I wanted my brother to forgive me. I had wanted it since the moment I told the company man the wellhead looked fine. And here was Cody's voice in the dark offering me the one thing I could not live without and could never have, telling me it was not my fault, telling me to let it go, telling me to lie down and sleep. And all I had to do was believe it. All I had to do was want to be forgiven badly enough to close my eyes. I did not close my eyes. I sat up in that bunk with my back to the wall and my eyes burning and my whole body screaming for sleep and for forgiveness. And I said the only thing I said to it that whole last night. I said, Cody would never forgive me. He'd be right not to. And that's how I know you're not him. And the thing in the bunk was quiet. And after a while it turned over and did not speak again. And I sat up the rest of the night with my back to the wall, and I did not sleep, and I did not lie down, and I was still, when the gray light came up in the porthole, still me. The helicopter came at 10 in the morning under a low gray sky. It could only take so many of us at a time, a dozen or so a run, and there was a list, a crew change list, the men whose hitch was up, and, by luck, or by something worse than luck, my name was on that first run, and so was the thing that had been Cody's, because Cody's hitch was up too. We had come out together and we were going home together, and I stood on the helideck in my survival suit with my bag over my shoulder and the rotor wash tearing at me, and I watched the men file aboard, and I got aboard, and I strapped in, and the thing that had been Cody's strapped in beside me, and the helicopter lifted off the Hesperia and swung away over the gray water toward the beach, 100 miles away. I looked back once. The Hesperia sat on the gray sea getting smaller, a great ship with a hole in the middle of it, 130 men still aboard, most of them, I was nearly sure by then, no longer men, and the well beneath it going down through the rock into the void where the mud vanished, into the open dark where the thing had looked at my lights, and I thought, we are flying 12 of them to the beach. Some of us on this helicopter are still men, and some of us are not, and I cannot tell which is which, not even sitting 6 inches away, and we are flying them to the beach, to the trucks, to the highways, to the towns, to the houses with the sleeping families in them, and there is nothing I can do about it. And I turned around and faced forward, and I did not look back at the ship again. I got to the beach. The helicopter sat down on the pad at the heliport in the marsh country south of the city, and we climbed out into the ordinary Gulf Coast morning, the smell of the marsh and the diesel and the hot asphalt, gulls going over, a parking lot full of the men's trucks baking in the gray light, and it was so ordinary, so exactly like every crew change I had ever come in from, that for a moment the whole thing on the ship folded up and went small, and I almost let myself believe I had dreamed it. Then the thing that had been Cody clapped me on the shoulder in the parking lot, the way Cody always did, and said, "Good hitch, brother. See you next time," and smiled its late smile, and got in Cody's truck, and drove away, north, toward Homa, toward Cody's wife and Cody's 3 daughters whose picture it had torn into small pieces and thrown in the trash. And I stood in the parking lot and watched Cody's truck drive away, and I did nothing. And that is the last of the things I have to live with, and it is the heaviest, because I knew where it was going, and I knew what was waiting for it there, and I did nothing. I did try. Later, I want that known. It took me 2 days to break the lock the Deep had put on my mouth, 2 days sitting in a motel room outside the city with the lights on, not sleeping, and then I called. I called the company and got a man who took my name and my rig and my badge number and got very quiet and then got very smooth and told me I sounded exhausted, that offshore work does that I should rest, that someone would be in touch. Nobody was in touch. I called the sheriff's office up in Homa about Cody, tried to say it in a way that would not get me committed, said I was worried about my friend, said he had not been himself, and they took a report and did nothing, and what could they do? What could anyone do? I called 911 from that motel room once, at 3 in the morning, out of my mind with no sleep, and when the dispatcher answered, I could not think how to say it. How do you say to a woman on a 911 line that something came up out of a hole in the bottom of the sea and put on my brother's face and drove north to his family? And I hung up, and I did not call again. The company plugged the well and moved the Hesperia off it within the month. There is a filing somewhere, a report to the regulators, and it says the well was abandoned due to unexpected downhole conditions and loss of well control risk, and that is not a lie, exactly. It is just a very small true thing standing in front of a very large true thing, so that you cannot see the large one. Unexpected downhole conditions. There is no box on the form, the same as there was no box for a diver walked 40 feet by nothing, no box for 2 fishermen taken off a deck in green light, no box anywhere. In any of the industries that work the deep for what actually lives down there under the mud, in the void, in the open dark, talking too slow to hear, patient past any human patience, coming up the wells and the moon pools and the tethers and the umbilicals, one small, warm, quick man at a time. I think about the recording more than anything else. The company took it, of course, the whole ROV dive, took the hard drives out of my van the day they flew the acoustics people out, and I never saw it again. And I have wondered ever since whether it still exists, locked in a file somewhere, the 50 minutes of my last real dive, the marine snow falling up, the wellhead, the mud that breathed, the seabed opening like an iris, the shimmer rising, and the sound, the slow sound, the talking, the acoustics woman wrote, sped up 10 times, 20. I have thought about that word until it has worn smooth in my mind. Talking. Not roaring, not calling, not the noise a hunting thing makes. Talking. A conversation, held at the speed of the deep, where the deep is so old and so patient that a single word might take an hour to say and a sentence might run the length of a man's life. And I have wondered, on the bad nights, what it was saying, whether it was saying anything to us at all, or whether we had simply flown a light and a microphone into the middle of a conversation that had been going on down there in the dark since before there was a sun. A slow, endless talking among the things that live under the floor of the world, and whether, when the mud drew back and it looked at my lights, all that had happened was that the conversation had noticed us. The way you notice a moth that has flown into the room where you are talking, and paused, and turned, and reached out one slow hand to see what the small, bright thing was, and then gone back to talking, having learned everything it needed to know about us in that one slow touch, having decided, in a word that took an hour to say, to come up and see the rest. I tried to find out what happened to Cody's family. I had to know. For a year I told myself that maybe I had imagined the worst of it, that maybe the thing wearing Cody had driven north and simply lived Cody's life, gone to Cody's job and kissed Cody's wife and raised Cody's girls, and that if it did that, if it just lived his life, then maybe that was not the worst thing. Maybe a family that never knew was better off than a family that lost him. I told myself that so I could sleep on the nights I slept. There was a man we had both worked with, an ROV super named Guidry, who lived down near Homa and knew Cody's people, and I called him, a year on, and I asked after Cody, careful, the way you ask, and Guidry went quiet on the phone the way people do, and then he told me. Cody had come home from that hitch different. Everybody said so, his wife most of all. He was calm, she said, calm in a way he had never been, patient with the girls, never raised his voice, never drank, a better husband and father than he had ever been. And for a few months she thought she had gotten a gift, thought the offshore work had finally worn the wildness out of him and given her back a settled man, and then the small things. He did not laugh at the things he used to laugh at. He held the baby wrong, she said, held her like he had read about holding a baby but had never done it. He would sit in the girls' room at night, all night, just watching them sleep, and when she asked him about it he smiled and said he liked to watch them sleep. And she woke one night, and he was sitting on the edge of the oldest girl's bed at 3 in the morning, just watching her breathe, smiling, and something in his face in the nightlight made her scream. And she could not say why, her own husband sitting on their daughter's bed, and she screamed, and he turned to her and smiled and said, "You should sleep, Renee. You're so tired. Come and sleep." Except her name was not Renee. That was my wife's name. Cody's wife was named Cherise. And the thing wearing Cody sat on their daughter's bed at 3 in the morning and called Cody's wife by my wife's name because it did not sort the memories right. Because it had a whole crew's worth of wives dumped out in a box inside it, and it reached in and pulled out the wrong one, and that was the night Cherise took the girls to her mother's and did not come back. Cody, the thing wearing Cody, did not chase them. It let them go. It stayed in the house alone, and it kept going to work, calm and smooth and patient, and it is, as far as Guidry knew, working offshore to this day, out on some ship over some hole in the ocean, and every 28 days it flies to the beach and gets in Cody's truck and drives to Cody's empty house and waits, and flies back out again. And no one has ever been able to say that anything is wrong with it, because nothing is wrong with it. It is perfect. It is a perfect, calm, patient, smooth man with no flaws at all. And it will pass every test anyone ever gives it, forever, because there is no test for the thing that is missing, which is the small, broken human mess that Cody used to be. I never went offshore again. I never went near the water again if I could help it, though that turned out to matter less than I thought, for reasons I will get to. I moved north, out of the marsh country, up into the piney woods of the middle of the country, and I got a job at a lumber mill, and I kept my head down and I built the quietest, smallest life I could build, and I kept a light on. I have to keep a light on. You know that part already if you know anything about men who have seen the deep, and I did not know it then, but I know it now, that the deep spoils the dark for you and you keep a light burning the rest of your life. I keep a lamp on by my bed and I do not sleep in the full dark, and if the lamp burns out in the night I come awake the instant it goes, my heart hammering. Back in the moon pool room on the catwalk watching the water go still and start to glow, that is the ordinary part. Every man who has seen it carries that. I could live with that. Here is the part I cannot live with. The part that is mine, and I think mine alone, and it is the reason for all of this. The reason I wrote it down. I cannot be sure that I got off that ship still me. Think about what I told you. I could not go 4 days without sleep, so I slept in pieces, in the mess, in the light, 20 minutes at a time, and I told myself the light and the 20 minutes were enough, that it could not get into me in the light in 20 minutes. But I do not know that. I never knew that. I made it up because I had to sleep and I needed to believe I could sleep safely, the same way Sorensen needed to believe the lamp was on his side. The same way every one of us needs to believe the one thing we cannot live without believing. Maybe the light and the 20 minutes were enough. Or maybe, one of those times, sitting in the mess with my back to the wall, I went under for 20 minutes, and something reached into me the way it reached into Cody, quietly, changing one small thing, and I came up not quite myself and never knew it, because how would you know? How would you ever know? They did not know, the changed men, or if they knew, they did not mind. The pause, the late smile, the torn-up picture. Would I feel it if it were me? Or would I just be a thing that thinks it is Del Kavanaugh, reading Del off a script it took down in 20 minutes in a mess hall? A thing that keeps a light on and stays away from the water and writes down a warning about the deep, because that is exactly the kind of thing the real Del would do, and does it perfectly, a half-second late, and cannot tell the difference. I have spent 10 years trying to catch myself at it. I check my own hands. I say my wife's name, my daughter's name, though my wife left years ago and my daughter does not call, partly because of what I became after the Hesperia. The man who cannot sleep in the dark and flinches from every pond and lake and flooded ditch and cannot say why. I run through my memories and I find them all there, warm, mine, everything Del should remember, and that proves nothing, because a thing that took me in 20 minutes would have taken the memories too, would have them all warm and complete, and would run through them just like this, checking and finding them all present and being reassured exactly as I am reassured, which is to say, not at all. I keep a light on, and some nights, in the piney woods, 1,000 miles from any sea, I lie in the lamplight and I think about the wells. There are wells everywhere. There are wells under half the country, oil wells and water wells and old abandoned wells nobody remembers, holes drilled down through the rock toward the deep, toward the void where the mud vanished. And I think about how the deep is one thing, how it does not care about the little holes we drill down into it, how it can come up any of them, any hole anywhere, if there is a warm sleeping thing at the top of it worth coming up for. And I think about Cody driving north to his family. And I think about the 12 of us on that helicopter, flown to the beach, to the trucks, to the towns 10 years ago, and how there was no way to tell which of us was still a man, and how we are all out there now, scattered across the country, living our quiet lives, keeping our lights on, and how some of us are reading ourselves off a script and do not know it or do not mind. The helicopter is coming for a lot of people. That is the thought I cannot put down. It came up one well, once, and got into a crew, and we flew it to the beach, and it walked into the parking lot and got in our trucks and drove off in every direction, and that was 10 years ago. And it is patient, and it has all the time in the world, and there are wells everywhere, and warm sleeping people at the top of all of them. I am going to finish writing this now, and I am going to leave the lamp on, and I am going to try, the way I try every night, to stay awake a little longer, to put off the sleep, to be still me for one more hour. And if I do sleep, and if something reaches up out of the deep of me while I do, some deep I have been carrying since the Hesperia, some void down inside where my own mud vanished 10 years ago, then the man who wakes up in the morning and turns off the lamp and goes to the mill will look exactly like me, and will remember writing this, and will believe every word of it, and will keep a light on, and will stay away from the water. And he will not be able to tell the difference either. That is the last thing the deep taught me, the thing it climbed 7,000 feet up a well to teach me. It does not need to take you screaming off a deck or drag you into the black. It only needs you to sleep. And everyone sleeps. In the end, everyone sleeps.